Okay. All right. We are recording, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Connecticut section AWWA. This is actually our first virtual workshop that the Connecticut section is hosting. So welcome all. Thank you for registering. With me in the room, as you can see, is the executive director, Ms. Romana Longo, who has been diligently working on getting everybody registered and making things go smoothly. So we thank you for your understanding, and we look forward to a great workshop. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. Our speakers are in the room, as well as all of you. You have a chat feature on your desktop or on your Zoom desktop. If you wish to answer or ask a question, you can just go from there, and our moderator will acknowledge your question. For Mary Ann's presentation, she will be able to see your questions, and they can respond accordingly. So after Mary Ann's presentation, we're going to be locking it back down, and all of the chats will go to our moderator, Mr. Kevin Armstrong, who is at the helm of our command center here. So with that, I'd like to, Romana, welcome. How are you?
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. Look at this great turnout that we have.
It's wonderful for our first virtual event. This is great. I would also like to thank you, Dave and Kevin Armstrong, for putting this together. Technically, it's a feat. So we are very grateful on behalf of the section for your assistance.
Okay. All right.
I do also have a couple housekeeping items. In accordance with the DPH's guidelines, document for operator certification training approval. No credit for training hours will be given prior to the completion of the training course. Participants must attend the entire session with satisfactory completed the program. I have sent out 2 items to you, our evaluation form. If you could please send that out, submit it after this event. And then for those of you who are looking for TCH credits,
can you turn her mic up?
Please stay afterwards, and we will do the self-assessment together, and you can submit that. So looking forward to a great program. Thank you.
Thanks, Romana. All right. Let's get the show on the road here. With us, kicking off the program this morning is our regulatory giants in the industry, if you would. For our welcome remarks, we have Commissioner Jack Witkowski, Chairman of the Connecticut Water Planning Council, and Ms. Lori Matthew, Branch Chief, and also a member of the Water Planning Council from DPH. So with that, Mr. Jack Witkowski has served, on the Connecticut Utility Regulatory Authority since 1997, and he is elected vice chairman by that body in 2007. And when PURA was established in 2011 as the state's new regulatory authority, Witkowski was elected as the vice chairman of the new authority. And prior to being appointed, Witkowski served as a member of the Connecticut General Assembly. So Jack has been around. He is also the president of the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners and is currently chairman of the Connecticut Water Planning Council. So Mr. Jack Witkowski is with us in the house. Jack's partner in crime, if you would, is Miss Lori Matthew, and Miss Lori Matthew is Connecticut's public water administrator, serving the public section chief as chief of the Connecticut Department of Public Health drinking water section. And the drinking water section is responsible for the primacy of all the Federal Drinking Water Act and a variety of state statutes that oversee the purity, adequacy of Connecticut's 2,550 public water systems. And Lori has worked with the department drinking water section in a variety of roles and programs. And Lori is currently served as the DPH appointed representative to the Water Planning Council and served as the New England Region 1 board member for the Association of State Drinking Water Administrators, and represents DPH on a variety of drinking water related committees, and serves as the chair of her town's inland wetland agency. So welcome, Jack and Lori. So I don't know who guys, you want to go first, Lori or Jack? I think Jack's going to go first or whatever.
Right, we're going to go first and then turn over to Lori and then we'll recap things together. If my slides could come up.
Okay, and there you go.
For some reason, I'm not seeing my slides.
We're working on that, Jack. There we go.
On it.
Oh,
There we go.
there we are. Okay, there we go. So good morning and thank you for the introduction. And Dave and Ronan and Connecticut Section AWWA. It's great to be with you this morning once again to kick off this virtual session. And I think it's important that we keep the dialogue going, and kudos to you, Dave, and your committee, and to AWWA for making this happen. I think that the water is more important now than ever as we look at the drought challenges we're faced with within the state of Connecticut. And we do our utmost at the Water Planning Council in coordination with our other agencies to get the message out to people. I'm really excited that Lori is going to be co-moderating this panel with me today. And I also want to give a shout out to the other members of the Water Planning Council, Martin Heft, who represents the Office of Policy and Management, and Betsy Wingfield from the Department of Energy, Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. Next slide, please. So we want to recap I think that we should recap the state water plan as much as we possibly can. And that's what we're going to do a little bit today. And then we're going to get into the implementation group and what they've been working on. But the water plan, as you know, took a great deal of time and effort from many individuals. And you see on the slide there that there were numerous people involved with the writing of this plan. So it's over 600-page plan. Looked at the various committees that we had, and you look at all the stakeholders. As you all remember, the Water Planning Council went to different geographic areas in the state of Connecticut to get input from the water suppliers, to get input from the elected officials, and to get input from anybody that has anything to do with water. I say it many times, water is kind of the stepchild in the utility world, but water is something we cannot live without, and water is something that we need in our day-to-day lives. We need it in the industry, we need it in recreation, we need it to sustain life. So it's very important that we have a plan. And after a great deal of time and effort, we got this plan because of all those stakeholders that are listed on the slide here. We did it through Newey-Pick and CDM Smith and Malone and McBroom, who did an outstanding job assisting us with the development and writing in this plan. Next slide, please. So why do we need a state water plan? People say, why? I mean, we have plenty of water coming, and it rains and the reservoirs are filled and everything else. Well, there's a lot more to water, as we all know. And the big word we want people to take home today is balance. To balance all of our water needs within the state of Connecticut. That is the goal. If people read about the plan, think about the plan, talk about the plan, we want people to know that we're trying to balance all the water needs of the citizens of the state of Connecticut. We want to preserve and protect the state's public drinking water supply. Very important. We have this whole PFAS, which Lori might talk about a little bit later on. The PFAS task force that was set up was all about protecting our water supply. There's regulations that are, and legislation, actually in some states in New England, that are being looked at right now. Lori and I just did a panel on that. We got to talk about a goal here, increasing frequency of drought. That's something we have a drought interagency drought group. Aquarian just yesterday put out a notice to customers in towns of Southwest Connecticut about the fact that they're going to have to start putting some drought measures into place. So because the reservoirs are so long, we did have some rain, but it's certainly not enough to bring the reservoirs up to the level they need. So drought is something that's very much on our radar, and something that the Water Planning Council came up with in terms of the interagency drought group, which is really headed up by Martin Heft over at OPM, who chairs that group. But we also have stakeholders from all the relevant state agencies, as well as people representing the water company of the state of Connecticut, what the climate change impacts are going to have to water in the state of Connecticut. Lori serves on that committee in terms of what's going to happen over the next 5-10 years relative to climate change and how that's going to impact water in the state of Connecticut. Environmental impairments caused by registered diversion, something that will always, we saw a stream last week at our Water Planning Council meeting that Alicia Sharman shared with us, which was dried up at this point in time. So that's something we have to really monitor. And finally, increasing peak demands for lawn irrigation. And that's something that people love to water their lawns and people love to take care of the golf courses, but that's something we really have to monitor very, very closely. Next slide, please. So we looked at the state water plan. I can't believe it's 6 years already, but it's Public Act 14163. And when the requirements of the state water plan, and this was something that was put out legislatively to the Water Planning Council. This was a charge of the legislature. And for once, when we actually, after almost 13 years of having Water Planning Council, we finally had some money put behind the Water Planning Council, and close to $1 million was allocated for this plan. So we could go out and hire consultants and work hard to come up with how we were going to set up and define the plan. And you looked at this, we want to look at the science, we want to look at the engagement, we want to look at the public health, we want to look at the policy. So you look at certainly with the science, we're looking at the quantities and qualities of water. Of course, that's something right within the Department of Public Health, Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. We look at the engagement. So one of the things that we're working on, we'll talk about this later on with our implementation work group, we want to set up a really good, comprehensive public outreach so we can inform state residents and communicate and let people know what's going on with the state water plan, and let the local towns and businesses and local health departments and regional governments know what we're up to. And looking at the economic impacts of the state water and state water plan, how important is water for water and how it really does impact the economy in the state of Connecticut. And again, that balance that we always talk about when we look at the state water plan, how we balance the needs of the citizens of the state and the businesses of the state of Connecticut, recreation, et cetera. And finally, the policy, looking at climate resiliency, infrastructure and land use measures, recommendations of laws and regulations. I mean, one of the things will come out of all these implementation subgroups that we have is that we could very well come up with some legislation that might have to be written and introduced to our friends at Hartford. Moving on, conservation water use. Marianne's going to talk a little bit about that later on this morning, which is something we really need to zero in on. And finally, interregional solutions and sharing. Next slide, please. So the key highlights of the state water plan. Again, these are the 5 areas that we want to zero in on and continue to let people know about. And again, this is something we'll be incorporated into our education and outreach plan, that we want to have a platform for consistent, informed decision-making. One of the issues that we had historically prior to the development of the state water plan was that we had environmental protection, public health, public utility regulatory authority, Office of Policy Management really did not have that much dialogue together. So one of the things that really was a milestone of the Connecticut Water Planning Council was the fact that we literally sit in one room, the 4 of us, and kind of hash things out, come up with recommendations with the input from the Water Planning Council Advisory Group and from the implementation group. One of the things, of course, we want to maintain the highest quality drinking water, and we want to also balance. And again, as we talk about this balance, we keep on saying that word, balance in-stream and out-of-stream needs. That's something very, very important that we need to do. We're going to look at water conservation. Very important that people just don't take water for granted, that they realize that there's parts of this country, that the parts of this world, but this country that don't have even the water supply that we have now, or come near the water supply we have now. So we really have to educate people about the relative programs that they might have relative to water conservation, building new homes, what kind of plumbing they might put in the home, how they might go about water and how they might look at the daily routine and what they might do to conserve water. finally, to maintain the scientific data. Next slide. So what we have learned so far with the Connecticut water plan, Connecticut again has a high quality of water for our needs. The water is not always where we need it when we need it. It's something that we're always grappling with, is that how we get the water to be wise and efficient, how it's going to be used wise and efficiently. That's one of the goals of the missions of the Water Planning Council. And of course, climate change will add stress. It's going to add continued stress to our natural systems and management systems. So those are all areas that we zero in on and continue to monitor in coordination with our Water Planning Council and our advisory group and the implementation work group. So now it's time that this plan's priority action items. Next slide. So what is in the final plan? So one thing we want to emphasize, and this is since day, is that this is not a solution to all Connecticut water issues, but a consensus-based plan to frame future water decisions. So when you look at the plan, which is very, very comprehensive, and the information in there is just absolutely incredible, but it's not a solution, but there's recommendations, and we aren't looking for a specific legislation in the state water plan, but what we're looking for is the issues that might come out of the plan that might come up to a consensus to introduce legislation. For example, with Mary Ann's work she's going to be doing, we're certain we're going to have some kind of legislation coming out of that particular group. So what is in the final plan? We have background, we have white papers on current policies and future options. We have technical information there on water needs, climate change, water conservation. And most importantly, we have pathways forward, implementations of near-term goals and topics for future discussion. So I'm excited now, as I have been since the beginning of the Water Planning Council in the early 2000s, but that we finally have a roadmap that's going to provide direction to all of us from our relevant departments, but also to all the stakeholders in the state of Connecticut, so we can really take care of this vital resource. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague.
Jack, thank you. So let's go to the next slide. And we couldn't be speaking about this in a more appropriate time. We are in Connecticut, we have 4 counties in stage 3 drought under our state drought plan, which the Water Planning Council reviewed and approved with a lot of great work. It is an extraordinary time where the GC3, the Governor's Climate Change Executive Order 3, as Jack mentioned, there's a climate change council talking about all of the issues, and you're seeing it play out right in front of us, and what is taking place in our state. The good thing about, and Jack has mentioned, I think over and over again, our theme here is that we have a plan. We have a state water plan. It has great information. We are starting to use that plan and implement it. This is one of the pieces of information that we'd like to emphasize, that for the very first time, for all of the basins, I believe there's 41 or 44 basins within the state of Connecticut, and this is the Quinnipiac Basin information. It shows you the details of how much water is in the basin, how much water is demand, and where the water goes, and for the future. And you'll see that some of these basins are over allocated, and that's the good. And then you look at the July conditions and the dry times, and you see how much less water there is in the basin. And then the extreme, if you look at these details, and we could talk about this slide all day, but we have to move on. But there's great information to look at, to understand, and to dive into. And this is what we're going to be using moving forward when we continue to work on implementation. So next slide. So speaking about climate change, there's a big section in this 650-page document. And if you are interested in climate change, this is one of the go-to plans. It talks about and evaluated a range of different pieces of information, and looked at the future, and looked at, you can see the 2080 projections. And I believe that we are starting to live some of this now, and that certainly extreme weather events are upfront and personal with us these days. and the weather patterns seem to be changing. And so how that affects our drinking water supplies and our streams and, everything that everybody enjoys, the lakes, the recreational lakes, your private well, how that all affects, the stream flows and other things that we all enjoy on the recreational side and swimming, and different also, aquaculture and all the other businesses that rely upon water to be there and to be there as it was 30, 40, 50 years ago. Well, times are changing. So there's a very good amount of information on climate change within the state water plan. So it's something to pay close attention to. So next slide, please. So what did we learn? Jack talked about the plan and the basic tenets of the plan being balance. Well, we know when we had a very good group and subgroups and subcommittees talking about how to come to consensus and what are we going to work on and what are the top items that we need, because there are so many things that need to be prioritized. There were hundreds of different ideas. So how do we boil all that up and bake it into something that we could talk to all of you about? What are the top items? Obviously, it needs to be scientifically based. We have this process from the 80s. And Mary Ann, you were in Connecticut, I think, during this time when we had these registered diversions in 1981 and 82, and we still have them. So some are obsolete that need to be looked at more carefully. And I'll skip through this because we could talk all day. The appropriate, and this is not, we don't do this a lot, non-potable uses of Class B water. Some of our traditional ways in Connecticut, which we are rooted in our traditions for sure, may have to change. And obviously, as Jack mentioned, protecting our drinking water supply watersheds and developing outreach and education is so critical and important. Let's go to the next slide. Other topics. Again, other topics: water conservation, interconnections, registrations, diversions, all the aging infrastructure. You see the picture of the pipe. I love that picture from my engineers. That's probably a 125-year-old pipe. And yes, it was still in the ground serving water. But you see how in many of our larger municipal public water systems have pipe in the ground that it looks like that. And so it needs replacement. There's a lot of investment necessary. Drought, you look at the reservoir, the picture there on the left, and then you look at the well in the center, and that's a typical private well that is low yielding. And there's 800,000 people in our state that rely upon private wells. So at the time of drought, what happens to some of those wells? Well, some of them right now are going dry. And so there's not many, but there's just about 100 wells that we have categorized as having been impacted by the drought and by the dry weather that we have on the private well side. So there's a lot to do here. In-stream flow is very important. Obviously, drought planning, wastewater and water reuse is something we have to work harder on. So those are topics for further consideration. So let's go to the next slide. So our Governor Dan Malloy, it doesn't seem, well, it seems like a very long time ago because of COVID, but this wasn't that long ago when the governor signed, an executive order that basically said, look, Water Planning Council, now that you have a state water plan, you need to get started. You need to implement. Let's work with the advisory group that has been established under the Water Planning Council, and let's get moving. So it is, and again, this goes back a year and a half ago, but it seems like just yesterday that we were given this mission by the governor to, and through his leadership, as Jack mentioned, it started in 2014. It started in the year 2014 when the legislation gave us the authority and provided funding, as Jack mentioned, to get moving. So with the governor's support, and we've never been in this position, and for over 70 years, our state has tried to put together a state water plan, but now we are getting the support from the highest level in state government, which is excellent to see. So we have to take advantage of this at this moment in time. So next slide. So this is where I bring back my colleague, Jack. We're talking about implementation. One thing that I would like to emphasize is we can't, and I know Jack would agree, and we can chat about this, we can't thank our group of volunteers enough. Absolutely. We have the advisory group, from all of these smaller teams that work on conservation, drought planning, private wells, education and outreach. We have small teams of people, and they're all volunteers. We don't
Very
have,
dedicated, very dedicated group of people spend a great deal of time, hours upon hours, between the implementation work group and the Water Planning Council Advisory Group. I can't thank them enough. I don't want to mention by name because I don't want to forget anybody.
there's so many
But
people. Yes,
there's too many people, but boy, they are a big, they're the backbone of the Water Planning Council.
absolutely. Without them, without the volunteers, we could not move forward. So, drought planning, Jack, I'm going to emphasize the drought planning because
You've
right
been very
now,
involved in that. Yes.
oh my goodness, and so have you. And there's a group of 6 state agencies working together along with 2 federal agencies that are putting our thoughts together around the drought plan. And this afternoon, we're actually holding a webinar with our larger public water systems to start talking through what they're doing and how they're doing it. Many of the larger public water systems have already enacted, their plans and are moving forward. So it's a very active time right now, and it's good to have a up-to-date state water plan as the foundation, and then even better to have a drought plan that's actively being utilized today. So without that, we wouldn't have that good guidance. So we're very lucky that we have these plans and we have the ability to implement them. So, Jack, is there an item you want to emphasize here? Or?
Well, with the education and outreach of the state water plan, there was a meeting held yesterday, and this group it's very, very important because you spend, many times the state spends money on programs or plans, and we don't get the message out to people. So we are very, very committed to getting out, and rather through radios or press releases or public speaking engagements, when we go out and speak public, maybe do some virtual, maybe do some webinars with the plan. But this group has done a really, really great job, and I can't thank them enough for what they've done. And I know the next Water Planning Council, they're going to have some recommendations for us to consider moving forward. Of course, the COVID has hampered a lot of our efforts, but
Sure
overall,
has.
we've got a great plan moving forward.
So it does, and with COVID, in my agency being the lead agency and all the other agencies being focused on COVID-19, it really points to the need to have solid emergency plans in place. And the drought plan, the state, and I'm not calling the state water plan an emergency plan, but it could be seen as that, right? That we are enacting something because we are in this time of climate change, that some of these are critically important to move forward with. So I want to point to water conservation and the Alliance for Water Efficiency's work as something that I think is mission critical. And where Mary Ann Dickinson, and you'll hear a lot from her and her panel, we believe that it is critically important to work on our laws. Look at the laws. They are old. They are aged. They are from the 80s. We need time to look at those. We need time to think about our fixtures. Our laws were good in the early 90s, but they have aged. And then looking at rates. I think that's these 3 items are critically important, and we're so happy to have the Alliance of Water Efficiency on board. So next slide. And I know we're running out of time.
Lori, I just want to real quick say, we also had the emergency preparedness that Lori and I kind of really put this together during Hurricane Iglesias. We put together a group very, very quickly and spent the entire weekend on the phone and that's and webinars, and that's something that we have to really, I think, make more efficient. I mean, we got through it. We did a great job. The companies did great. But the fact that during storms, that many times the water doesn't flow. Water does not flow without energy. And Lori and her team did an excellent job working with the companies to make sure, and we're working with Eversource, United Illuminating, to make sure, and we did these some calls 3 or 4 times a day, to make sure the electric companies got out there to get the power back on. So that's something, there's just so much that goes into water that people just take for granted. And that storm preparation was one of them.
Excellent, excellent. And again, I want to emphasize while we end this presentation on the word balance. And I think this leads well into what you're going to hear more and discussion about conservation and the need. We cannot overuse our precious drinking water supplies. outdoor irrigation, outdoor water use, unnecessary water use, conserving water needs to be part of our mindset moving forward. And so because we don't want to dry up streams, as Jack mentioned, one particular stream was brought to our attention. I'm sure there are others. We need to provide for a balance. We have good drinking water, but we also make sure that water is in stream for all the other uses that are out there. So the word balance is mission critical, and it was the central core of the state water plan. So next slide. So we thank you. We thank you very much for your attention to us. And I'm always pleased to present with Jack and work together as a group of 4 agencies came together and will continue to work together under the state water plan as well as the Water Planning Council. So thank you.
And all of our meetings are open to the public, so please join us. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jack and Lori. And I have to thank Jack and Lori for their participation. They've been actually participating in our sustainability committee from its implementation, and we certainly do appreciate their input and their hard work. And I love working with those guys. So thanks again, Lori and Jack. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All righty. Next, ladies and gentlemen, we have our next presenters, another veteran of our sustainability committee and a longtime friend, and she's a Connecticut native. This session, ladies and gentlemen, we'll explore the innovative practices of cross-planning between water supply planning, community master planning, and the planning guide outlines strategic points of intervention or places where planning intersect with source water protection. Planners can review development projects and identify development best management practices. And at the end of this presentation, there will be a Q&A with our executive panel. And with that, Mary Ann Dickinson, who is going to be moderating this panel, has been, again, on board from our sustainability from the get-go. And Mary Ann is the president and CEO of the Alliance for Water Efficiency, a nonprofit organization that dedicated to promoting the efficient and sustainable use of water in the United States and Canada. And she's based in Chicago, and she has come when we had the in-person workshops, and she comes out here on her own dime. So Mary Ann, we can't thank you enough on that. But based in Chicago, the Alliance works with nearly 400 water utilities, water conservation professionals in the business and industry, planners, regulators, and consumers. And in 2014, the Alliance won the U.S. Water Prize in nonprofit category for its work. And she's also the executive director of the California Water Efficiency Partnership, based in Sacramento, and she has over 40 years of experience in the business. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Miss Mary Ann Dickinson, who's going to introduce her all-star panel for some great stuff. So Mary Ann, thank you for joining us this early in the morning. I know you're on a different time zone, so without any further ado, Miss Mary Ann Dickinson.
Thank you, Dave. It's always a pleasure, and to be part of this first virtual workshop is also going to be a pleasure. So thank you for inviting me. We have today a very interesting panel for you. We want to talk about all of those water issues that Jack and Lori mentioned in their presentation, but how do they tie to the way our communities are planning their growth for the future? So we have 3 great speakers for you. I'll have to ask our speakers to maybe talk 15 minutes rather than 20, because we've lost a little bit of time this morning. But I think we still want to have a little bit of time later to have you be able to ask our panelists questions. You'll see a chat at the bottom of the Zoom navigation bar, and you can type in questions as we go along, and we'll try to get to them as we can. So our first speaker is John Guskowski. And while John brings up his slides, I'd like to introduce him to you. He's a project manager in the Planning and Landscape Architecture group of the consulting firm CHA Companies, and they're based in Stores. John's work has spanned numerous sectors of planning, including work as a regional planner with the Capital Region COG, a full-time staff planning director in Woodstock and Thompson, a consulting planner for the towns of Essex, Clinton, and Hampton, lead planner for special studies in Wethersfield, Manchester, Derby, Brooklyn, Middletown, Mansfield, and Putnam, and a project manager for numerous private development projects across southern New England. He's got a bachelor's degree from Fairfield University and a master's degree from UConn. He's also led the nonprofit group Connecticut Resource Conservation and Development Council as chairman for the past 17 years. So John will start us off and talk about the connection between water and land use.
Okay. Thank you, Marianne. Thank you, everyone, for participating and letting me be part of this this session. As Marianne said, at probably too much length, I've been involved with a number of towns. I have just a map up here indicating some of the towns that I've worked in, both for the municipalities and for private development or the private sector, working in and dealing with those communities on development projects. So I have a pretty decent sense, at least sort of the eastern 2/3 of the state, about how planning and development gets done. The other thing I would note is that I do serve as government relations chair for the Connecticut chapter of the American Planning Association. So I have been involved with a number of policy discussions at the state level about how state laws affect planning. Hopefully this will forward. Okay. So from a local perspective, and Lori gave an excellent overview of the state water plan, which I think is an incredible resource for the state. But the question is, how does it, no pun intended, trickle down to the local level, and how do local planners get their arms around planning for water issues? So I'm going to run you through a few maps that sort of perplex local planners and local planning commissioners. So I'd like you to sort of think about your town or a town on the map you're familiar with in Connecticut. And as we're going to scroll through, think about if you were a local planner or planning official, chief elected official, who would you try to coordinate with? Who would you look to work with when dealing with some planning issues? So everyone knows famously Connecticut has 169 independent towns, divided into 8 counties, and hopefully people are focused on their hometown to see how things get sort of sliced and diced. We're divided into several major watersheds, which is a matter of actual geography rather than political distinctions. Those 8 basins are further subdivided into sub-regional drainage basins. We have 5 conservation districts. It used to be 8. That changed about a decade ago. It's now just 5. Lots of it, little aquifer protection areas and all kinds of local regulation that goes along with that, changed from town to town. Again, and we sliced and diced, not counties, but councils of government. It used to be, I believe, 15. We're down to, I don't remember now, 11, 9 councils of government. And those areas further divided. DEP has 11 conservation officer areas. So if you're looking at conservation projects, again, where does your town fit and how does it get sliced and diced? And then while doing the water plan, we divided the state into 3 water planning council regions that really don't match up with any of the prior geographies. And then in that water plan itself, you have exclusive service areas. And so your town might belong to a water service provider that is completely different from the one just the next town over, who is also part of your council of governments or your conservation district area or your watershed. These things can be very different. And so from a local planning perspective, if you're starting out with these questions, you sort of ask yourself, well, who do I coordinate with? Whose job is planning for water? And I come from Northeast Connecticut, a lot of these small towns that don't have public water lines. They don't have, Connecticut Water or Aquarian sort of running their water systems. And so, and further, a lot of these smaller towns may not even have a very robust public works staff, may not have a very robust planning and zoning and conservation staff. So the answer from town to town could be very different, is who's in charge of this, who do you coordinate with, and really whose responsibility is sort of planning for water kind of at the fundamental level. And I would like to note that John Filchak from NECOG provided a lot of those maps. And what's interesting is he has a whole presentation called The State Divided, where he has somewhere around 150 different maps how the state sort of separates itself in terms of different sort of overlapping responsibilities and jurisdictions. And those were the ones I showed you are really just sort of the, the big picture government and conservation ones. It's really unbelievable how sort of fractured we are in terms of the sort of planning efforts that we undertake in the state. So again, the question for sort of a local planner is how do we get our arms around this? And so fortunately, the Source Water Collaborative worked with the American Planning Association, which is the parent organization of my Connecticut chapter, to put together a guide back in 2015, 5 years ago, called Advice Worth Drinking. And it really is sort of a fundamental and relatively stripped down guide to how local planners, how regional planners can kind of get a sense of the fundamental importance of planning for water and kind of how to get at it. So I'll just very briefly go through a couple of the highlights of this very good guide, which I've linked to here, and we can certainly provide the link after the presentation if people are interested in looking this up. So when we do planning, we try to start out with the vision, with the goal. What are we hoping to accomplish? And it's pretty fundamental. Obviously, I'm not breaking any new ground for the people in this conference that it's really, really important that drinking water sources, whether it's a public source, whether it's private drinking water sources, are properly protected. And that there's an incredibly important and direct link between land use and how we develop or conserve things on the land and our water resources. And we need to communicate and find ways to develop clear linkages between what we do as plans and we do in terms of development at the local level and our water quality, and that's across all sorts of different disciplines. So the overall goal is to find ways to incorporate water planning, that thought process, that discipline into the plans that we make. So it's not just sustainable water source because we're using less of it in terms of conservation, but we're treating it less because we are keeping water cleaner farther upstream. But the key to all of this is collaboration, and this is something that I think planners bring to the table very well. Is recognizing that we have a relatively narrow area of specialization, but that includes recognizing that plans involve a lot of stakeholders, and there's an important need to collaborate across disciplines, across walks of life, across municipal departments, across state agencies, with other planners, with landowners, with watersheds, and particularly with regulators, to make sure that we are making the best decisions at the local level. And so the question is, how do we get there? And how do we integrate our thinking across these different elements of the plans? And what we need to recognize is that planners, as a role in a municipality or in a COG, have relatively little control over the levers of power. We don't tend to control things. What we tend to do is advise and sort of point direction. And so what the Advice Worth Drinking guide does is it identifies these points of intervention, these relatively limited levers of power, and what the planning efforts can do, where we can attack the problems to create some benefit. And so long range visioning, we're planners because we plan. Our job is to take that 20,000 foot view, and so help municipalities, help watershed groups, help regions set those goals and identify where we want to be in terms of our source water protection, and recognizing the value of those things, and then actually the execution of the plan. Whether that's a watershed-based plan or a source water protection plan, a community master plan, a village plan, or in the case of the state, working on the state water plan. And I know the water utility planning councils, the WUCs, were very much driven at the regional level by regional planners. I don't know, Aaron is going to talk about that a little bit later. So that actual plan making is an important point where planners can be influential. At the local level, my bread and butter is regulations, and actually putting together your zoning regulations, your aquifer protection regulations, your subdivision regulations that directly affect the way in which development projects do or do not affect our water quality, our water quantity. And that, is through things like mandating low impact development techniques, mandating, groundwater recharge, ensuring that we have adequate buffers in between development and water bodies that might contribute to a regional water system. That might include things like densities, reduced densities in watershed lands, or increased densities in areas that have existing adequate water service and sewer service, so that we can really focus our growth in those areas that are already properly served. And they include some bigger picture questions like transfer of development rights, which I'm going to touch on, but Dwight is certainly going to go into in greater detail. And other things like project review and working with developers, because even in the case where you might have some decent regulations, there are better ways to produce projects that have a more beneficial, or certainly a less impactful effect on the environment and on water supplies. When we're doing a plan review of some sort of special permit or commercial development, there are different techniques that can be implemented that planners can have sort of put their thumb on that scale. And then the public investment, making sure that municipalities, when they are working on their capital improvement plans, seeking grants, make sure that they tie things back to water quality, water conservation, and make sure, regardless if it's a recreation plan, if it's a sidewalk extension, if it's an open space acquisition, to make sure that those big picture water supply, water quality, environmental quality elements are incorporated, and that those things are priorities of the town, so that when you're basically putting together a grant application or something like that, can point to the town's master plan and make it more possible that the town gets those funds and is able to make those investments. So there are a lot of ways that the planners as a discipline, particularly at the local level, can be influential. And so just in summary on the guide, it's very important for planners and their stakeholders to make sure that they tell that story and to recognize these truths, that you can't have a healthy community without adequate and high quality drinking water. And the land use connection between planning and zoning decisions and water quality is incredibly strong and needs to be front and center. And from an economic development standpoint, a community that does do a good job in supplying water, in protecting its water quality, will thrive in a very competitive market. And so we have an important role to play in that. I'll just go very briefly through a couple of examples and a few of, again, these of my small towns.
If you could, John, really
Okay.
go,
Sorry.
yeah, because we're running out of time. Thank you.
And so very briefly, when I worked for the town of Woodstock, which is geographically up in the northeast corner, but basically the entire eastern half of Woodstock supplies the water for the town of Putnam. And so Putnam's water quality depends incredibly heavily on Woodstock's land use. And because of the intermunicipal nature of Connecticut's laws, these towns are really under no obligation to cooperate. Woodstock has a lot of dairy farms in its eastern part. Manure management, nutrient management is incredibly important. And so struggling through that intermunicipal coordination process was incredibly illuminating, and actually got me very into the idea of transfer of development rights, which hasn't happened there yet, but it's something that I'm keen to hear Dwight tell us more about. In the case of Clinton, this is Route 81 in Clinton. You can see Clinton crossing outlets. I'm sure people are familiar with that. Up here, Rocky Ledge neighborhood. had a wastewater problem. They had a lot of breakouts and septic systems were failing. There's no sewer lines in Clinton, so that couldn't be a sewer solution. And so what it ultimately ended up being through a lot of collaboration and outreach and work with Connecticut Water is it a water supply solution. We extended water lines up there, and what that allowed us to do is eliminate wells, and eliminating wells eliminated those well radiuses, and so we're able to find other places to put septic systems. So the link between clean water and wastewater and wells and septic systems is incredibly important at a local level. And finally, in the town of Hebron, we're struggling with a brownfield redevelopment property. It's a relatively small site. This is the Tertian Mill. There's a corridor of wetlands. There is some surface level contamination. It doesn't go that deep, but in order for the redevelopment of this place, ideally as a restaurant or brew pub or something like that, is going to be significantly hampered by their lack of ability to get a community water system or a community water well drilled on this property because of contamination and wetlands and things like that. And so what we are hoping to do is there is a public water supply over by Amston Lake on the Hebron Lebanon line, and extend that water line in order to serve this redevelopment effort. But that becomes a financial challenge because the town can't really pay for it out of pocket. The developer, can't foot the additional $500,000 bill, and the water service provider is reluctant to extend lines just for one new user. And so this is a challenge. This is a planning challenge that we are struggling through. So there are lots of examples of that. And I guess I will leave that there, and happy to answer questions at the end, and looking forward to the rest of this presentation. Sorry, I blathered on a bit, Marianne.
No, it's all right. We're just trying to make up a little bit of time because we got started late. So thank you very much. The great introductory presentation, John. So our next speaker is Aaron Boudris, and while he pulls up his presentation, I will go ahead and introduce him. He's a senior regional planner at the Naugatuck Valley Council of Governments, where he focuses on environmental planning issues. He represents the COG on the Western Connecticut Water Utility Coordinating Committee, the WUC, and is the Connecticut Councils of Government representative on the Connecticut Water Planning Council Advisory Group. Aaron earned a BA in anthropology and an MS in geography from Central Connecticut University, and he'll talk with us about planning for water sustainability.
Thank you, Marianne. So I'm just trying to arrange my desktop here so that I can control things. Okay. So like Marianne said, I work for the Naugatuck Valley Council of Governments. We're a 19 municipality region in West Central Connecticut. Our board consists of the chief elected officials of our 19 members, and we're one of 9 COGs in the state, like John said. We focus heavily on transportation planning, but we also play a role in land use planning. We prepare a regional plan of conservation and development, which is an advisory document that provides policy recommendations for the future development of the region. We focus mainly in that document on issues that transcend municipal boundaries, like water supply. By statute, COGs also provide advisory review of some local land use actions that could have regional impact, like subdivisions abutting municipal boundaries or zone changes or zoning regulations near town boundaries. And we also review local plans of conservation and development and provide feedback to the towns. We host a regional planning commission, which is a forum for municipal planning officials that helps oversee our planning programs. And we provide technical support to members and regional nonprofits. We also partner with the Center for Land Use Education and Research and the Connecticut Bar Association to provide regular training for local land use commissioners. And when the need arises, we conduct studies on regionally significant issues. So I just want to step back and sort of talk a little bit about sustainable water and what is sustainable water. So, the quality and quantity of a water supply needs to satisfy the needs of a growing population and support public health. And, the stock definition for sustainable water that I've seen several times is meeting our own water needs without compromising the needs of future generations. But sustainable water supplies also need to keep enough water in the natural system to support in-stream uses like wildlife habitat and recreation. They need to balance the needs of water consumers with the needs of communities in source areas. And it needs to be equitable and affordable for consumers and economically viable for suppliers as well. So, I think that goes back to the balance that Lori and Jack were discussing earlier. And it needs to do all of that in the context of increasing development pressure and a changing climate. And land use can have a considerable impact on the sustainability of a water supply. On the demand side, how land is used really drives water needs. So it's important to consider water availability when you're making land use decisions or identifying areas of development. And on the supply side, how land is used in a water supply watershed or a wellhead recharge area is critical to the quality and quantity of the water entering the supply. So obviously point sources of pollution are a concern. And that's really the focus of the Aquifer Protection Area regulations. But non-point source pollution is also a concern from increased stormwater runoff that results when land is developed. Natural ground cover slows and filters stormwater and allows infiltration, and disrupting or replacing that ground cover can seriously impact water quality. Impervious surfaces and even lawns can prevent stormwater infiltration and increase runoff speed, volumes, and temperatures, and can concentrate contaminants in runoff, which can result in increased need for filtration and treatment, or the need to look for new sources of water. So how can you protect water quality? One way is preventing development by legally protecting watershed land. And there's several state and federal programs to help municipalities, water companies, and nonprofits do that. The one I'm most familiar with is DEEP's Open Space and Watershed Land Acquisition Program. Just in the past few years in our region, the program's funded watershed acquisition in Watertown, Shelton, and Bristol. And I'm hoping that a joint application that was submitted this year by Regional Water Authority and the town of Cheshire will also be awarded. But conservation is not always feasible, especially in larger watersheds. And that's where regulating land use can also help protect water resources. So zoning can be used to control the type of development or restrict more impactful uses in sensitive areas. Subdivision regulations and site design standards can ensure that septic systems are properly designed and sited or require proper buffers around water courses. Sediment and erosion control measures can limit runoff from agricultural or construction sites. And controlling runoff by implementing low impact development or green infrastructure practices can help mimic pre-development hydrology and preserve water quality. But these are all local municipal controls. And if you look at the generalized zoning map on the slide, it's pretty clear that those regulations do not end at municipal boundaries. And since watersheds do cross municipal boundaries, that can make managing them through land use regulations difficult. Just as an example, the Waterbury water system, which is the largest system in our region, the city operates a series of surface water reservoirs with watersheds stretching across 8 municipalities. And there's currently no local regulations or zoning initiatives for the protection of those sources. But regulating land use in those watersheds could be difficult. First of all, because there's so many jurisdictions that you would have to deal with, but also many of the watershed communities are far removed from the benefits that come with maintaining that water quality. And there's conflicting needs, mainly between the economic development of those communities and source protection through limiting that development. And I'm not implying that there's an immediate threat to the Waterbury water system, but the department does monitor development and conducts annual inspections. And the majority of those watersheds are pretty rural. But even though they are rural, there's going to continue to be increasing development pressure. And in order to plan for long-term sustainability of the water supply, that development does have to be considered. So the Department of Public Health has promoted a planning process called the Drinking Water Quality Management Process as a way to plan for water across multiple jurisdictional boundaries. It's a really intensive and comprehensive planning process that brings together diverse stakeholders, from suppliers and consumers to business owners, developers, landowners. And the goal, I think, is to really find a balance between watershed protection and community needs, and with a goal of allowing and planning for responsible economic development while still protecting water supply. These plans prioritize subwatersheds for protection and make specific recommendations for proactive watershed management, like changes to local and regional POCDs or local policies that support watershed health. And today, I think there's only been one regional scale plan completed in the southeast part of the state for Groton utilities. But even though this process hasn't seemed to get much traction statewide, it really seems like a very good way to address the complex needs around planning for water quality in larger, more complex water systems. So, even if that type of comprehensive planning is not imminent, it's a very good time right now to get water and water supply better incorporated into local and regional planning efforts. I don't think there's ever been so much information about water so readily available as there is right now. The State Water Plan, the WUC Coordinated Water System Plans, and the Drinking Water Vulnerability Assessment and Resilience Plan for Coastal Connecticut were all recently published. And each one of those plans set priorities, identified issues and needs, and compiled a lot of information that can now be incorporated into local and regional plans. So, I would encourage water suppliers and any water stakeholders to engage locally and regionally, especially when plans are being updated. Sorry, I keep doing that. And generally, there's just a lot more available data out there that can make tasks like assessing watersheds easier and more accurate. GIS parcels are becoming more universally available. Land use and open space data is improving. Efforts to standardize locally developed spatial data is ongoing, and that'll make regional scale analysis a lot easier. I don't know if anybody's seen it, but there's a great new high resolution land cover data set that was published by NOAA just a few weeks ago. And you can find current and future water supply watersheds and aquifer protection areas published by DPH. And the fact that a lot of that data is available in publicly accessible GIS data viewers, like the ones hosted by CT Eco or some of the COGs, makes it a lot easier for planners or municipal officials to make better informed land use decisions related to water supply. Okay, just want to switch gears here for a little bit and talk about a positive outcome for sustainable water supply that recently happened in our region. So the Heritage Village Water Company operates a well field in Southbury adjacent to the Pomperaug River, and it provides water to customers in Oxford, Southbury, and Middlebury. Groundwater withdrawals from that well field have been shown to directly impact the flows of the Pomperaug River, which has a history of very low flows in the summer that severely stress fish populations. In 2015, Southbury attempted to develop a town-wide water use restriction ordinance with the hope that it could be used to reduce water demand during periods of low flow. And that effort was ultimately not successful, and the ordinance was never passed. And I think, looking back, I think it was sort of a political decision, but I think there was reluctance to impose restrictions on private well owners in the basin, and the fact that surrounding municipalities were not interested in sort of taking the lead or following that lead was also an issue. And to sort of exacerbate the issue, in 2015, the Toantic power plant, which is a very large gas and oil fired facility, was sited in Oxford that would be served by Heritage Water and would require substantial additional water withdrawals. So to help preserve flows in the Pomperaug, Heritage Village Water Company and Connecticut Water Company worked with the Pomperaug River Watershed Coalition and the town of Southbury to develop a low flow operations plan. And what it basically entails is voluntary water use restrictions that are enacted at river flow trigger levels that are directly related to wildlife stress. And all Heritage Village Water Company customers and private well owners as well get this notice and are asked to reduce use. And Connecticut Water Company also agreed to offset Toantic's daily water use during the summer using an interconnection with Connecticut Water Company's central system in Middlebury. So, you know, that could really go a long ways to helping maintain river flow. And I think these solutions are really good examples of collaboration between diverse stakeholders that resulted in a more sustainable water supply by helping protect that in-stream habitat. And, you know, I think it shows, you know, what John was talking about, you know, the importance of collaboration between, you know, watershed organizations and water companies and you know, really all different stakeholders involved with water supply. So Mary and I went pretty quick there.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Aaron. Appreciate it. And we do have one more speaker on our panel before we'll engage in a little bit of dialogue and discussion. We are trying here to connect the dots between all of the information that you heard about in the Connecticut Water Plan and how that will intersect with local land use. So our last speaker on the panel is Dwight Merriam. He is a lawyer and land use planner in Simsbury, is a fellow in the American College of Real Estate Lawyers, a fellow and past president of the American Institute of Certified Planners, and past chair of the American Bar Association section of state and local government law. He has published over 200 articles and 13 books on planning and zoning issues. He's got a BA from the University of Massachusetts, a master's in regional planning from the University of North Carolina, and a law degree from Yale. He's also the chair of the Rivers Alliance, and so he participates a lot in these kinds of water issues as well. So I will bring up the presentation, and I think we can take it away.
Well, we're ready to rock and roll, and thank you, Mary Ann, for handling the slides, and thank all of you for joining us here today. And I understand this is being recorded. If you've enjoyed this, and I hope you have, I trust you have, let others know, and we'll see ways to get this presentation, this morning's program, to them. Let's turn now to what we're trying to protect, aquifers and water supply lands. Now, Aaron and John have done a spectacular job of telling you all about regulation, and regulation is going to vary depending upon the resource. Is it a river resource, a lake, a pond, a reservoir, or is it a subsurface resource? We're talking about protecting all those, and I'm going to principally address how we can move development rights around to protect property values and at the same time preserve the resource, hopefully without an expenditure of a lot of money. The takeaway from John and Aaron is that we need to orchestrate techniques. I'm just talking about development rights transfer. We need to think about everything else that we do, including infrastructure expenditures. Planners, and I'm a planner as well as a lawyer, we talk about when you extend water and sewer, you're just begging for development. You will get development. Trust me. I'll come and I'll represent somebody and we'll rezone the property and we'll develop it if you put water and sewer there. So I can't overemphasize the importance of capital improvement programming. No, but here's a slide, and I want you to sort of get a brain reset here to think about leaving the underlying zoning, but consider overlays where you have a resource, whether it's a surface or subsurface resource or a watershed area. And we can put, as shown on this slide here, an overlay for protecting that. So now let's think about slicing and dicing land in the context of the Fifth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment of the US Constitution, here's my copy from my office, you can read along. But here's the Fifth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment is that allows government to take property when they pay just compensation. And we have two types of takings. We have eminent domain, which is a direct taking, and that's allowed by the Fifth Amendment if you pay just compensation. The notorious Kelo case is one example. But we also have indirect takings or inverse condemnation or regulatory takings, all the same thing. And when you start over-regulating water resource lands, you risk getting sued, you government risk getting sued for taking. And that's what we want to stop. We need to protect private property owners. So let's think for a moment, again, reset, reboot your thinking about property. Here's how property is really divided up. You just don't own a piece of land. First of all, you have property in two dimensions. We know that, right? The surface and the subsurface. And then we have air rights on top of that. The Grand Central Terminal case in New York City was an air rights case. We have consolidated holdings where when we talk about the relevant parcel and takings, and we're not going to go there today, but we do talk about where properties are operated by a single entity, maybe in different ownerships, however. And we have non-contiguous holdings and later acquired holdings. I'm giving Marianne a run for her money. She was complaining, I got 33 slides. She says, Dwight, you can't do it. You just keep your finger on that advance button, Marianne, all right? All right? So, transfer development rights, that's what we're here to talk about. I've written and studied extensively on this since I was a second-year law student in 1976 and 77, and I published a piece in the North Carolina Law Review the next year called Making TDR Work. It really started about 12 years before, in the mid-60s, with John Costonis, a law professor, talking about preserving historic buildings. I'll put up on dwightmerriam.com, I'll put Making TDR Work. I'll put an introduction to a book called the TDR Handbook, which was recently published, and another article called Reengineering Regulation, which gives you a lot more detail on what I'm addressing here today, and they'll be up on dwightmerriam.com in the next couple of days. So now let's go, we're back at transfer development rights, Marianne, and here are the principal elements of it. You have a sending site, which in our case is a water resources area, surface or subsurface supply, and you want to prohibit development or greatly restrict development. Maybe allow only a primitive camping, for example. But you've got to pay for that because you're taking private property rights away from people. So you put a restriction on a sending site. Then you have a receiving site where you can probably take some more density. And you set up a scheme by which you can move the development rights from the property you want to protect to the one that is capable of carrying more development. The coin of the realm is a development right of some sort, and I'll give you an example from the Pine Barrens in New York in a minute. And I think a key to this is having banks. Just like banks stabilize our currency, they can stabilize the value of development rights. And development rights programs that don't have a bank are very difficult to manage. So here's a couple examples from Boulder County of both receiving and sending sites. The green is sending sites, the blue receives additional density, and then we go to the next slide and you'll see a little more detail of how that works, where there are open space and conservation easements, potential sending areas in the light beige or whatever that is, and the purpley is the potential receiving areas. So in return for putting a conservation easement or restriction on the no value or buffer for open space or the potential sending areas, the property owner gets to sell her or his development rights to a developer who then puts some extra units on one of those purple sites. All right, so let's give one more picture here of what happens. And this is sort of a takeoff on the Grand Central Terminal case. You've probably all been to Grand Central Terminal, famous case in 1978. Involving a prohibition on building a tower on top, and the development rights were able to be transferred to adjacent properties. And this graphic simply shows what could happen with Grand Central Terminal and why the US Supreme Court decided it wasn't a taking. That the three-part test that they set up dealing with diminution in value, investment-backed expectations, and the importance of the government's interest, found in this case all that 50 stories of air rights could be moved over. I'm moving it over here. I just moved it over. I'm back to another site. And that was part of the calculus that the US Supreme Court had in finding that the Penn Central Railroad Company had not had their property taken by over regulation. Now here's an example of Pine Barrens in New York. Really the things I wrote about in 1976, 7, and 78 in making TDR work are surprisingly unchanged today. They're still difficult to make work, but in low density areas, for example, watershed lands, it can work, and it has worked in the Pine Barrens in New York. And one of the things that's essential, and it is about high quality surface and groundwater, as I highlight here, 52,000 acres of core land is what they want to preserve. And here it is, of 100,000 acres in Brookhaven, Riverhead, and Southampton. It's voluntary. Not all TDR programs are voluntary. You can make them mandatory. And it's incentive based. So not only do you have to have a bank, I think, but you also have to have potentially some incentives, a density bonus on top of moving the development rights. And obviously you have to have sufficient demand for the receiving areas for private property owners to buy those rights. The institutional cost of these transfers is high because there are lawyers involved and there are documents. So in New Jersey, they developed, and you can do it anywhere, you can do it in Connecticut, transfer development credits, where you have a single property owner owns both the site to be preserved and the site to be developed, and that wipes out the transfer problem. But here you have a bank and you have incentives, and it includes sanitary credits. You get one credit for 300 gallons of sewage discharge, and that allows people elsewhere to develop at a higher level. So let's go on here, Marianne. And they can be multi-jurisdictional. I did one for the Cape Cod Commission that allowed transfers throughout Barnstable County on the Cape. They don't work when there isn't a market. They do work in low density situations. So let's go on to why does TDR prevent takings? Because it allows a private property owner to capitalize on their development potential by selling those rights to somebody else. And it may be a requirement, as mentioned in the Sudham case before, you can bring a takings case. Can a transfer development right be taken by the government? Well, it can, in the sense by overregulation, if there's no market for them. So what do we do if TDR is not working besides a bank and incentives? If that's not making it happen, What do we do, Mary Ann? We go on to the next slide. There we go. And so here you can do the purchase of development rights. So if your transfer isn't working, you can always go buy it. I always say that to people when I'm representing a government. If you don't like what's happening, buy it. So you can go and you can actually use your eminent domain power to take development rights, but you could also negotiate a purchase. And we do this frequently in Connecticut in acquiring conservation easements. And there's a wonderful report here from the Western Governors Association. I'm involved with the Rocky Mountain Land Use Institute in Denver. And this is a great report, which will show you how it can work. And here's another report, a part of that whole system. And then the next one in Michigan, we find a very good example of the town buying the development rights on some 2,000 acres. If you look at our near neighbor, Block Island, my beloved Block Island, you know, something like virtually half of the island is preserved with conservation easements. Largely Dorothy McCluskey was really the driver behind that, right, Mary Ann? You remember Dorothy?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah. And Dawn, and they made it happen. And some of it was given, some of it was purchased, and now the island will be preserved for future generations. So the PDR programs results in a net loss of some development potential. And as I said, what happens, we use the government or a private land trust to purchase development rights. That's the way the 1,000-acre preserved, largely in Old Saybrook with a little piece in Essex and Westbrook, was ultimately preserved when Lehman Brothers went under and they liquidated that asset. And I was involved in that transaction. And it was a combination of Nature Conservancy, Trust for Public Lands, the 3 towns, and the state then Department of Environmental Protection. And those consortiums of interest can make this happen. And we need to look at that in waterlands. The benefits of PDRs is that they take care of the takings issue. The property owner gets cash, property assessments go down, and it permanently preserves the resource. And what's negative about PDRs as an alternative? It costs money. It removes the economic safety net of land value. We know that farmers, for example, hold out land because when their kids go to college, they want to sell a piece as part of their capital reserve, and they just don't want to give that up sometimes. And then we have the notorious case of the chicken farm in Connecticut. And anybody know that case? The first PDR purchase, the state paid up somebody a whole lot of money to preserve, put a conservation easement on it. And lo and behold, they then put a concrete pad down and build a chicken house, giant chicken house on the property, and said, there, it's still agriculture, but it was clearly an industrial operation. Well, we fixed the law, but you have to be very careful in those restrictions. So let us turn here at the end to, and really the beginning. It's the end of my little talk, but it's the beginning of what we really need to focus on. And thank you to Mary Ann for her leadership and pulling together another collaborators in the form of the Environmental Law Institute and River Network. And I was privileged to be a member of an advisory group on the development of the NetBlue program. And what it does is basically provides a system by which, and we're doing it in Bozeman, Montana right now, of doing offsets for water use. We're not talking about developing new sources of water. We're talking about preserving existing water to enable further development. So I'll leave you to reading the details of it, but I urge each and every one of you, you get on your search engine, whatever it happens to be, and just type in NetBlue AWE. That's all you have to do. NetBlue, separate word AWE. It'll take you right to the site. Read about it. It's a wonderful program. Talk to Mary Ann and me if you wish, anybody else that's been involved in NetBlue, about what you might do in your community to make it happen, because it's not a panacea, just like TDR is not, and PDR is not, and transfer of development credits is not. But they're all tools in our toolkit of what we need to do in order to preserve and protect high quality potable water, recreational water uses, which is what I, as president of Rivers Alliance, are particularly focused on, as the dual use. And NetBlue can help us get there. It's going to be a great help to Bozeman, which is struggling with water shortage issues. So with that, Mary Ann, 33
Thank you.
slides, 17 minutes.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you very much, Dwight. This is great. Everybody got us back on time. So thank you very much to our three speakers. And at this point, we can open it up for questions and answers. I don't see that we have, we do have a question that I'll ask as well. Are there demand response programs for water conservation that are similar to those available for electric consumption? And that's one I can probably take on and answer. The answer is yes. Demand response programs have been developed in the same kind of technical sophistication as we have for energy efficiency. And those water efficiency programs have been demonstrated in communities all across the country. When I was in Connecticut, we actually launched a statewide program of water efficiency during a very major drought that occurred in 1989, 1990. And those programs have been analyzed and shown to yield a permanent savings that don't diminish substantially over time. That's if you hardwire the savings by installing, like in energy efficiency, fixtures and appliances that are lower water using. You're not just relying on consumer behavior for those changes. So the demand response programs come from a mixture of the consumer behavior and retrofits of high efficiency equipment. Okay, so I don't see any other questions here, but we have a few that we'd like to sort of throw out in the minutes we have remaining. And you've heard from three great speakers about the issues involved in, jurisdictional problems. How do we fix those? How do we spur more collaboration? Does it require state or local regulation specifically? Can it be done on a voluntary basis, or does it have to be mandated? How do we achieve that collaboration if it isn't mandated? So I'll ask my speakers to comment on that. Let's start with John.
I think it has to do with money. And it's about the market. I think, as Dwight said, TDR works well when you have a sort of a hot market. So there's a lot of demand for land consumption, and that demand can be shifted. So that's sort of a private sector solution when a market is hot. But when it's relatively quiet and you don't have that same incentive, municipalities turn inward and they look at their own tax issues and they look at their own grand list. And so there needs to be some financial incentive, whether that comes from the state in terms of, sort of grants, or whether that comes from a larger structural system where towns can share tax revenue a little bit more easily. And unfortunately, I think that probably works best in areas where you might have a regional school district. So the towns are used to relying on each other and used to sort of sharing revenues. But it's ultimately a money thing. Towns could love the idea, and it makes all the sense in the world for Putnam and Woodstock to work together because they sort of share a watershed. But unless you get past the tax issues and those financial incentives, the towns just aren't going to do it. So it's money.
Do you think it's politics too, besides money?
Oh, certainly. And there's the provincialism, even when you have like possibly regional school districts, you don't want that people get very provincial about their town versus that dirty town next door.
Mm-hmm. Dwight, do you have any comments? You're smiling, so you must have an opinion.
I'm smiling because John's right on, and I'm waiting for Aaron to jump in here. But 3 quick points. Number one is Connecticut, unlike a large minority of the states, does not have the consistency doctrine. We need to make all our zoning and land use regulations and decisions under them consistent with our plans of conservation and development. We don't do that. We need the General Assembly to mandate consistency. Number two.
How is it that's not happened? I mean, Connecticut's advanced in so many other ways.
Land of steady habits. The inertia of rest is as powerful as the inertia of motion, Marianne. The second of my 3 points is that we need a much stronger council of governments, RPA system. We're weak. We're toothless. I'm sorry to say, you work hard. Look at Aaron's nodding his head. He's going to get whiplash. We work hard, but we don't have the mandate from the state, and it's terrible. It prevents us. Number 3 is that in Title VII, I wish I just sent you all the statute number, but most people don't realize that all our cities and towns can work with any other city and town on anything that they do in their town as a matter of state law. So watershed planning, the watershed extends into the next town. Those 2 towns should collaborate on their zoning and their other land use and wetlands regulations. And they can do that. The commissions can meet together. They can adopt regulations together. They can do everything that they do individually together, but no one does it because they don't even know the statute exists.
Aaron, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I mean, I agree with most of that. And, I think, we are, our planning agencies are really advisory on almost, all counts. And, no matter how good of an idea we propose, thinking about some of the shared services that do make economic sense for the towns, and do sound like a great idea and do get buy-in up front. As soon as towns realize or see that, they're going to lose some control over something, they sort of they really fall flat, So yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult as an advisory agency to sort of make things happen.
So I'm going to pivot a little bit to the source water protection issues that you all discussed. And here's a question that I think will be of interest to our water utility folks. We tend to give up upland because we don't necessarily think that the flow from those areas are necessary for source water protection. We've got treatment requirements, federal as well as state. So are we giving up too much of that upland resource and we're not doing enough source water protection as a result?
Yes. I mean, Rivers Alliance has been fighting that issue in upland areas that are not necessarily protected watersheds, but are part of the watershed. And once we lose that, once that land's developed, it's gone.
Yeah.
And we have very little control over what people dump in their backyards. And we should not be giving up, in my personal and professional view, and that of Rivers Alliance, we should not be giving up those upland areas without a whole lot of careful consideration. And one of the things that we should all, and I'd like Aaron and John to speak to this, is we should have at the local level basically a water impact review for every land use decision. Just a very short check the box. What impact does this regulation or decision have on water resources? And make people ask the question and answer it.
And that's the developer's attorney speaking.
Well, not always, but
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Dwight. And the fact is that, every town is responsible for writing their own regulations. And so there's tremendous inconsistency there. And in all the towns I work in, I think maybe only 2 that I've seen includes some sort of, like requirement that you get some letter or statement from the regional water provider about that they've reviewed this. It's just not a consistent thing. And yeah, so to piggyback off of Dwight's recommendation that we have a POCD, zoning regulation consistency thing, towns need to have a few baseline things that they absolutely must do in their zoning. And I can see, water impact being added to that list. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So Aaron, you get the last word on this one.
I agree. And I think that's something that came up a lot in the WOOC process was, water companies saying that, there was not early enough notification that there was going to be a new development, and they may have to serve water to it. And one of the recommendations was coming up with a checklist for local commissions to really consider that early on in the process, and I think that's a really good idea.
So as our final question, I'd like to tee off what you've just said. Having worked for a water utility in Connecticut that was very interested in their local land use decisions, not all utilities are that involved. They tend to feel that, that's land use is handled by the communities. The water utility handles water and wastewater services, and the two don't often intersect. What advice would you three have for a water utility manager or wastewater utility manager to reach out to their communities to create that connection if it doesn't currently exist?
Talk to your planner. I would encourage the water utility person to find out who is the town planner or the next best thing, to make sure that the Planning and Zoning Commission, who sets those rules, understands that there is a limited water supply, and the location of that water supply, and that they need to factor that into their decisions and their plans.
Okay, Aaron.
Yep, I agree. And there's we do land use referrals. We do provide input on some land use issues in towns, and I don't think it would be a bad idea if COGS saw those development plans as well. So it's another idea.
And Dwight?
Well, again, I think some kind of check off, a simple call, a short letter, an email from the water utility about a development project, maybe of a certain minimum scale, just to make sure that people know that something's going on.
Yeah. So I think we will wrap up this panel and get Dave, your schedule back on track. I just want to mention one project that the Alliance for Water Efficiency is doing. We have been hired by the Babbitt Center to inventory how state water utility plans reference and connect with local land use planning. And so we're looking at all 50 states, and Connecticut actually is not too far behind the pack in this. You're one of the leaders. You're one of the 6 states that we've selected now to interview in depth because you have more requirements than others do. So it's a tricky issue. Most of the rest of the country is not doing anything in this regard. So the conversations we're having here, I think, are very fruitful. So Dave, I will turn it back over to you. Thank you for the panelists. This was a terrific panel. I appreciate your presentations and your willingness to be part of this.
Thank you, Marianne.
Thank you, Marianne.
Marianne, thank you for your diligence, and you put together, as always, an all-star panel. And I know Dwight has participated in earlier workshops, and Dwight, thanks so much. But we also want to thank Aaron and John for contributing, because there's a lot of great stuff that can be learned and by working together, and that certainly is an attribute. I think that the Alliance for Water Efficiency is right on top of. So, Marianne, thank you, and thanks, guys, for all your panel. That is going to bring us to a little break here, and so we're going to be back on track with our municipal energy measures. Okay, and Mr. Jeff Ulrich and his panel are going to be also. We have a newcomer. Okay, that Todd Bergeron from UI has basically handed over the reins to Miss Liz Murphy. So Liz is on board, and so we're going to take a hopefully maybe a little shy of 10-minute break, and we'll be right back here with our municipal energy for municipalities and utilities. So Jeff, get your guys ready, and we'll be all set. Thank you. Hey, Liz, can you hear me, Liz?
Hi, yes, I can hear you.
Awesome. Hey, thank you so much There you are.
Here we
Thank you.
are.
Thank you for jumping in at the 11th hour here, as far as that goes. And I appreciate you joining Jeff and Justin. I think you're going to be a welcome wealth of information, okay, that our utilities and municipalities can use. So great.
Yes, thank you. My pleasure.
Okay. I don't think you have a presentation. I didn't think, but basically dealing with working out on the panel discussion, that'd be great.
Yes, so Justin will be covering the presentation on behalf of Source, and I'll chime in as needed, just to add a little color along the way, but I didn't prepare any formal slides.
That's no worries. That is no worries. Justin, Justin, you're going to be running your own slides.
That is correct. Yeah. Me and Liz
All right,
will,
Justin.
we'll be able to handle from the utility side. We got
All right.
very similar programs.
Fantastic. We'll see you in just a few. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back live. And again, thank you all for joining us. This is the first virtual conference that the Connecticut Section 8 WWA is holding. And with me, my wingman here in the studio is our Executive Director, Mr. Romana Longo. So thank you for joining us, Romana.
Thank you for having us.
Awesome, awesome. And just as a matter of housekeeping, Romana, why don't you remind them, okay, what we have to do for the CEU? So
For the CEUs, we need to make sure we all came back after break. So if you could go into your chat rooms and say hi, hello, shout out anything so we can keep track that you are back with us.
okay, so go in and say hello, wave, do something, just so we know you're all not sleeping under your desk and go from there. All right, we're going to get going, ladies and gentlemen, with our next presenters. Okay, and this is our energy panel that basically Mr. Jeff Ulrich has put together, again, with an all-star panel. And Jeff is a frequent flyer, has been participating in our sustainability meetings since the get-go. And again, this session will focus on developing programs that support and encourage energy efficiency and renewable energy projects, and evaluation of energy efficiency, renewable energy, green building programs. Examples of energy efficiency programs for municipalities and utilities will be showcased, and this will be also a Q&A at the end. Participating in the moderator of this panel will be Mr. Jeff Ulrich, who is basically has worked in the water industry for over 25 years as Aquarion Water Company's Director of Supply Operation. He oversees a department of 75 people that produces drinking water for over 700,000 people in Connecticut. And the department also operates 29 reservoirs, 9 water treatment plants, 60 pump stations, 100 wells, 70 water storage tanks. And Jeff received his bachelor's in civil engineering from Villanova University and a master's of science from Rutgers. So Jeff, thank you again for participating. And also on Jeff's panel, okay, Mr. Justin Beavis, who is our Eversource representative. And Justin is an energy efficiency sales executive for municipal and large commercial industrial customers throughout the state of Connecticut for Eversource Energy. And he has worked for Eversource Energy for 12 years and has a vast experience on the service side. For the last 6 years, he has focused solely on energy efficiency and has helped to manage Connecticut Energy Efficiency Fund. And Justice is an active in the community and has been a member of the Fairfield County Chamber of Commerce, Business Council of Fairfield County, and the Stamford 2030 district. So Justin, thank you for joining us. Also, ladies and gentlemen, we have Miss Jess Leclerc, and who is another frequent flyer of our Energy Efficiency and Sustainability Committee. But Jessica is part of the Sustainable CT initiative at the Institute and serves Connecticut as the Institute's liaison to the municipalities. And in this role, Jessica directs municipal outreach, manages outgoing community project, identifies and develops training opportunities for communities. And prior to joining the ISE, Jessica was a program manager at Connecticut Institute for Resilience and Climate Adaptation. And in that role, Jessica supported and tracked the Institute's research and outreach projects intended to increase resilience and sustainability of vulnerable communities in Connecticut and the growing impacts of climate change. And Jessica also has worked as an environmental analyst at the State of Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, AKA DEEP, and working in the Office of Climate Change, Technology and Research. And among her many roles in DEEP, Jessica was responsible for producing the state's annual greenhouse emissions inventory, as well as assisting with the development and implementation of emissions reduction strategies from the municipal sector, most notably transportation. And Jessica also oversees the state's offsets program of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. So Jess, thank you again for joining us. And last but not least, coming in at our 11th hour, Miss Liz Murphy, and she's our representative from our other community, or not community, but energy efficiency. I'll get it right. UI, there we go. You know, I have those senior moments anyway. But Liz is a supervisor of commercial and industrial conservation and load management team from the Connecticut UI, SEG, and the CNG, and Massachusetts Berkshire Gas at the Avangrid, and she has spent past 11 years working on behalf of Connecticut's residential and C&I ratepayers funded clean energy program. Liz received her MS in resource economics from the University of Connecticut and a BS in economics from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and she currently holds UI's seat on the Connecticut Energy Efficiency Board. Liz, thank you so much for joining us. So sorry I messed up your intro there, but anyway, Jeff, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you got it.
Okay, and Ramona, you'll pull my slides up?
Yep, we're going to get Jeff's slides up, and again, Jeff has been a frequent flyer on our sustainability committee, and we appreciate all his efforts and taking part in the committee.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction, Dave, and we appreciate the opportunity to continue on this topic. In general, you know, the sustainability committee for the last several years has been doing primarily presentations around water, but sustainability does involve a lot of other things. And I think you can see that from today's presentation. We started with water with Lori and Jack, and then with Mary Ann's group, we've been talking about land use, and now we're going to delve into power. I'm going to start it off with just about a 5 or 10 minute little introduction about what Aquarion's done and how it applies to utilities. How some of these things apply to utilities, and get where things have come from and where we anticipate them going. But then really Justin and Jessica are going to get into the details around the different programs that are available to everybody. Next slide, please. So just a quick little thing about Aquarion Water Company. We are a privately held water company, so we're not owned or managed by a municipality. We're owned by as a private company, similar to the gas company or electric company. We're 160 years old. One of our little claims to fame is P.T. Barnum was our second president. He was quite the industrialist in Bridgeport and wanted to make sure that his factories had water and they didn't burn down. So he was one of the original founders of the water company 160 years ago. We serve 75 systems across 3 states and approximately 700,000 people. And we for the last 3 years have been a wholly owned subsidiary of Eversource Power. Next slide, please. So just some of the topics over the years are what's going on around energy efficiency and sustainability. The terms have changed over the years. It's gone from conservation to energy efficiency, and now it's getting into sustainability. And really the trend of that has been a result of things that have happened over the years, and really is where the concerns around energy efficiency started in the 1970s with the oil embargo, and that moved a lot of things forward. And around the same time is also when the environmental movement started, and people started to do get concerned about the impact on the environment and started to apply more rules and expectations around energy efficiency. Moved into conservation incentives over time, audit programs, efficiency standards, the demand response programs. We were pretty active in the demand response programs, turning off large demands at certain times of the year to reduce the demand on the overall system. And now we're getting in the project, we have been in the project rebates and those types of things to encourage energy efficiency. Next slide, please. Aquarium projects over the years, we have done a lot of energy efficiency projects in general, because of the encouragement of the utilities and other incentives, but also they do save you money, so we'll look for opportunities to to reduce those costs, especially because power plays such a big line item in the overall budget of the company. So we are always looking for those opportunities, and things that we've done is scheduling, when we do backwashes and and pump to fill tanks in the evenings and stuff like that, take some of that demand off of the peak periods of time. We've done a number of pump evaluations to identify pump efficiencies and replace pumps that aren't at the higher levels of efficiency. And VFDs, we've installed VFDs, across most of our pumps at this point, again, to try to get that energy benefit and reduce that demand. We've also done fuel changes. We've had some really successful projects of converting some of our heating of our buildings from oil to natural gas. And Justin we'll be talking about some of the programs there, but we've gotten rebates involved with that, and it has a significant savings, and there's a real positive environmental benefit of that switch as well. Water conservation, we've talked about this in the past. We've rolled out a 2-day-a-week conservation program to 6 towns, and we've saved on the order of 800 million gallons a year around that program. So that's also a benefit. And we are moving forward with our first solar project right now, and we have started to purchase electric vehicles. Next slide, please. But there, just kind of anticipating where things are going to go, is there are companies, the companies up here, they really do drive change across all industries. And what we're seeing is, not only, from a customer expectation perspective, we've seen it, the service and the level of service that, the IT companies or the information companies can provide right now has really raised the customer expectations. They provide a high level of customer service. They provide instant access. You can, go online right now, order something, and it'll be at your house the next day. So it's really raised the expectations of customers. The customers are expecting phone access now to be able to get on their phone and get updates on their bills and status and when things are going to be delivered, when they should be received, all that stuff, and get text updates as it moves its way through the process. And they really, the customers have really moved to a level of expected self-service, that they shouldn't really have to talk to anybody anymore. And those things are, that's in that part of the world, that sales part of the world, but we're seeing that expectation rise on us on the utility side as well. Next slide. And so what we've seen already is, those types of companies are committing to being carbon neutral. And you can see a number of them committed to carbon neutral in the next 10 years and over the next 20 years. And so they're kind of raising a new level of expectation. I don't think it, in my own mind, it doesn't really improve customer service to make that kind of commitment. But I think what they're expecting is that customers want to be associated with companies that have made those kind of commitments. We get rated by JD Power on a yearly basis, and we're always analyzing that assessment. And part of that assessment is how people feel about your company and whether they want to work with your company. I think there's also a level of, well, maybe there is a component of maybe they'll pay a little more, or a customer will be a little more connected to us and build that long-term relationship with them. So by making these type of commitments, and so we're starting to see it. We're anticipating this going forward, and as you can see at the bottom, Eversource, our parent company, has also committed to being carbon neutral by 2030. So I think this is something that the industry will have to probably consider going forward. We're not going to be on the leading edge of this, but as these other companies meet these commitments, I think it's going to broaden the expectation that other utilities do it, and customers are going to expect this to be the standard at some point in the future. Next slide, please. So just where is Aquarian going? Where do we going in the future? We'll continue to do our energy efficiency projects, but in reality, we've gotten a lot of the low-hanging fruit. We've generally projects that had 3 or 4 year paybacks. I think we're in pretty good shape and have done most of those, but we'll continue to analyze those, and we'll probably extend the payback periods that we're willing to move forward with projects on. We'll continue to expand. We intend to continue to expand our water conservation program, ultimately taking it statewide, which should have also the benefit of significant reduction on demand on the environment from a water perspective, but also energy perspective on pumping those and all the chemicals associated with that. I expect that we'll continue. We're doing our first solar project this year. We'll do additional solar projects in the future. and adding electric vehicles to our fleet. Our parent company, Eversource, they've started adding electrical vehicles to their fleet and are looking for ways to get electric trucks in their fleet. I don't think the industry's really gotten there yet, but I think you can see that that's going to be expectation going forward as well. And we're even looking at forestry management. We manage thousands of acres of forests, and is there an opportunity there to modify or adjust our forestry management to also come in line with becoming more and more sustainable? So that's kind of a high level introduction to the topic and where things have gone and how they've impacted Aquarian and where we see things going. And I'm going to let Justin and Jessica really get into the specifics around the program. So Justin is from Eversource, and he'll be explaining his program. And then after that, Jessica from Sustainable Connecticut. So Justin, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Let me just go ahead and share my screen with you guys in a second.
And while Justin's pulling up the slides, I'll just mention that he's presenting really on behalf of Eversource and why, because our energy efficiency programs are administered jointly statewide. So we have very similar offerings available to all of our electric and natural gas customers throughout the state. So there are, a couple of nuances here and there, but at a very high level, they're quite similar. So thank you so much, Justin, for taking the lead on this.
Yeah, not a problem. And Liz, thank you for joining us. Yeah, as you said, our programs are very similar. So feel free to jump in as we go about the conversation here. There's a lot to talk about from the energy efficiency standpoint. And so I first want to just thank everybody for joining us today. Thank the Connecticut American Waterworks Association for allowing us to speak on this behalf to really drive in that energy efficiency is important. We heard a lot on the water conservation portion of the business, and from our perspective, from Eversource and Avangrid, we want to talk to you about the electric and the gas ways to reduce that consumption and save, both on energy usage and on your electric and gas bills. So the agenda here today, there's a lot to talk about. I'm going to dive right into this instead of just going through an agenda here for you guys. It's very important that we get to all these topics. Really, the first thing I wanted to talk about is benchmarking. Everybody should be doing benchmarking to really understand, first off, where you stand as a consumer of energy and gas usage. You really need to create a baseline before you start taking on energy efficiency measures. So you understand, what am I accomplishing? How am I going to get to the reduction that I want to see, and really moving towards carbon neutral. So Eversource has partnered with UConn to help municipalities benchmark their portfolio buildings. So we've got here Dr. Amy Thompson of UConn, who we partnered with, and her staff to really assist municipalities with benchmarking and any of their needs. And so kind of the great thing about this program is they help pretty much guide you to get all your buildings into the EPA portfolio manager. Once they are established in the system with the correct electric counts and the gas accounts and the meter numbers, which can be a difficult task. We don't make it easy. We've got numbers all over your bills. So it can be a little difficult to understand exactly what you need to get into the portfolio manager. They take that and make it very easy for you guys. They'll help collect that. I provide them the information. And then once it's in the system, it's going to automatically update. So the thought and the theory here is that once we get this all established, you'll be able to benchmark your entire portfolio and really understand what each building is using, and perhaps look at and identify where there are outliers in your facilities, and that you could undertake some energy efficiency measures. Where are you consuming energy that you shouldn't be? What time of day is a large amount of your energy consumption occurring, and what can you do to kind of curtail that? So I would urge you to at least start doing that process. We've seen a lot of energy committees around the different towns and municipalities undertake that process. So I think it's important. It's a first great spot to start. And so I'm going to kind of jump into some of the programs here. Obviously, we see lighting as the most common measure through the energy efficiency programs, through Eversource and Avangrid. And it's going to continue to be important for the near future. I will warn everybody, and I don't want to scare people, but the lighting incentives are eventually going to go away. LEDs are becoming fast and used pretty much everywhere. So we've geared our incentives to really showcase the next step when you put an LED retrofit project together, is working towards controls. We want to see when you do a lighting project, not just a retrofit or put a tube project in, which are great, you're going to save energy on it, but you really need to start to look at the control methods within those systems. So high-end trim, occupancy centers, sensors, daylight harvesting. We want to see those types of control strategies go through your projects. And we've tiered our incentive levels to make that a more viable option. So basic lighting projects they're still very lucrative for Connecticut at 40 cents a kWh, up to 45% of the cost of a project currently. Getting into the higher end of the incentives by putting more controls, you can get up to 55 cents, even 75 cents for network lighting controls. So we've geared our lighting incentives so you take advantage of doing these lighting control projects now. When you do a lighting project, you're probably not going to touch it for a good amount of years. So when you do that now, we want you to take advantage of control measures. And so on top of that is we built comprehensive incentive portfolios as well, incentive packages. Lighting is great. We want you to do lighting and we want you to get that done. But you also need to look at what else can I do within my facility? What other measures can I look at outside of just the low-hanging fruit of lighting? We want you to look at your EMS systems. We want to look at their boilers. We want to look deeper, take a deeper dive into your facility to really understand everything that you're consuming for consumption of power at your facilities, and look to identify measures in there. So we've tiered our comprehensive incentives to take advantage of that as well. So going from a simple single measure of 50 cents all the way up to 75 cents as well. And you'll have to excuse me, I'll try not to cough all the way through this presentation. My daughter was nice enough to share her cold with me this week. So Liz, if I start coughing, I'll have to hand it over to you. So on top of that, of all the electric measures that you can do, I also just wanted to highlight all the different gas measures that are available for you. I don't expect to, I'm not going to go through all these right now, but if you're doing electric measures, also, and if you're a natural gas user, we want to take a look at what are the gas measures you should be doing in your facility. So the best thing I say is, if you're going to do electric projects, start to find some gas measures. So the simplest thing that you should be doing every single year at a minimum, if you have steam traps, is looking at steam trap repairs and looking at insulation for your facility. Those are two simple things that you should be doing pretty much every year to identify in your facilities. And outside of that is all these other different potential gas measures that you can undertake. And again, by adding these measures in, you become more comprehensive, and we build the incentives for your projects to bring down those costs by doing that. So where do we start? So what programs do we have to kind of help you guys out to identify those projects? So we've built some programs geared towards some of our smaller customers and municipalities to use. So the first one is we have a small business energy advantage program, which is for electrical consumers that are 1 million annual kWh and less. And then there's also another program we built. It's called the Business Energy Advantage Program, which is for 5 million annual kWh and less. Excuse me. So the good thing about these programs is that they have a bench of approved contractors. What these contractors do is they provide a no-cost energy study of your facility. So they're going to go take a look at your site to identify as much potential for energy efficiency measures that they can. So, and this is at no cost. So I would urge municipalities to take advantage of these programs. Really, if you are within this capacity as a municipality, and this is within your total consumption, and if you don't know how much you use overall, first benchmark, find out what it is, and then you'll be able to understand if you fall into these programs. And if you don't know, you can still even ask myself or Liz for help understanding kind of where you fall within these programs. So the good thing about these programs as well, on top of the no-cost energy study that they're going to provide to you through an approved vendor. They also are able to then take on-bill financing. So by going through this program, you're able to finance them through your electric and gas bills. So I'm going to go into the finance portion of this right now as well to really understand. So now you've identified an energy efficient project, and it's, what do I do to pay? How do I pay for that? So by going through some of these programs, you're allowed to have 0% on-bill financing. So you can't really get better than 0%. If you're not using these programs, you should be. For a free study and to put it back on your electric bill, to me, it's a no-brainer. The biggest one that I wanted to showcase today is the municipal $1 million rolling fund, which is also 0% on bill. I see a lot of municipalities doing projects out there. What they're not using is the 0% financing that's available to them. Each municipality has a $1 million rolling fund for on bill through your electric bill or gas bill. As long as it's a qualifying energy efficiency project that goes through us for a letter of agreement, that's through a retrofit project. I'm going to showcase a project at the end of this to kind of show how they've taken advantage of that. But that's probably the biggest fault that I see municipalities not utilizing the funds that are available to them at 0%. There's also other loans that are available through Bank of America. If you have a much larger capital project, we partnered with Bank of America for a pure loan, basically taking $1 million projects and over, making them for a much longer duration. And what they do is they take your prime rate and they're able to lower that 1% below. So there's still advantages of financing. If you don't fall into the initial SBA, BA programs, you have the opportunity as a municipality to use those programs. And then there's CPACE, which is financing an energy efficiency project or a sustainability project through basically a tax assessment on the property, which stays with the property. So there's all these different ways that you can finance projects that you really need to take advantage of. And if you have no idea, the best thing to do is just reach out to your utility. We'll inform you how to utilize these programs. We'll help you along the way to first identify the project and then finance the project. And Liz, I'll stop there for a second. If you have anything that you want to add in, if there's any different nuances between UI versus or Avangrid versus Eversource.
So two things. First, I just want to reinforce the point that it's really important that our customers take advantage of these programs, and you really should be utilizing them. You're paying into them already. There's a surcharge on our electric and natural gas bills that is where you're through that surcharge, you're paying into the Conservation and Load Management Plan budget or the Connecticut Energy Efficiency Fund. And that funding is being utilized to support all of these programs. So Aquarion is an example of a customer that's done a really wonderful job over the years, taking advantage of the programs and reducing their energy consumption as well as their overall utility bills. So it's really important that customers understand the benefits of these programs. And Justin, you're doing an awesome job outlining all of the different opportunities, and there's really something for everyone. That first step is really getting in touch with your utility company to understand how to get started so that you can start taking advantage. And now's a better time than ever. So some of the incentive levels that Justin walked through and the lighting and the comprehensive incentive structure slides, those levels are higher than they've ever been historically because of COVID-19. So we're doing everything that we can to support our customers that have been financially impacted as a result of the pandemic, and particularly on the commercial and industrial side, we've seen a lot of customers that have sustained negative economic impacts. So we want to provide some financial support through energy efficiency improvements to help them kind of overcome those impacts that they've endured over the past few months. So it's a really great time to start participating and taking advantage of the programs.
Yeah, that's a really a key point, is you're paying into the fund. So please use it. It's your money. We just manage the fund for you. So on top of all the other energy efficiency programs that you can undertake, I wanted to highlight a couple other things that are available for customers to utilize. So there's demand response programs, both through ISO New England and through Eversource. And Liz, I'm not sure actually if you are utilizing demand response programs as well?
Yes, we
Okay.
have a similar offering.
Okay. And so the goal here really is to try to meet those peak demands on the system with a voluntary basis of reducing consumption during that time. And so by, we utilized three, for Eversource, we utilized three CSPs, curtailment service providers, to really sign up customers through the Eversource program. You can stack that program along with the ISO New England program to really increase the benefit of performing during these times. And really, the goal is to reduce electric consumption during peak times on the grid. So on the transmission and distribution system, there's some times around the year that we have our peak season for electric consumption, and it's what we do to really reduce that is voluntarily sign up customers, either through HVAC setbacks on their systems, process changes, just eliminating usage altogether. So there are some certain circumstances where we have rock crushers that are able to turn off for the day and really assist the grid and not and basically stabilize the grid during those times of high peak. And we will pay customers to do that. So there's an incentive to take advantage of these programs. The difference between the ISO New England and the Eversource program is the Eversource program is notified a day in advance. So you kind of get an idea of when these peak times are coming so you can prepare for it. The ISO New England, it's a 30-minute advance notification and you've got to respond pretty quickly. So we're all trying to accomplish the same thing of reducing that consumption during that time. And so here's the three that we have approved through Eversource. Feel free to reach out to them or me to get involved with that program to understand what you can do at your particular facility, municipality to get involved and to be incentivized to help the grid at the same time. So if you don't fall into SBA programs or VA programs that have no cost studies, we still want to help you figure out what you could do at your particular site. So a lot of times it just is about asking your utility representative for assistance. If you need help identifying projects, a lot of the times we're able to partner on study costs. Most of the time it's a 50-50 cost share on identifying those particular measures at your site. What we do is we use approved engineering firms who are not trying to sell jobs. They're really just there to identify energy efficient measures that you can undertake at your site to reduce costs. And so they give neutral recommendations. They're not trying to sell you a project. They really just want to identify ways for you to save on your consumption and your electric bills. And so we can partner in those studies. If you have no idea where to start and you don't fall into those initial lower usage categories, SBA, VA, we're here to help you guys out. And so I know we're running pretty good, so I want to run into a couple special initiatives that we have for 2020, some RFPs that we put out, both Eversource and UI. So Eversource put out a K-12 initiative to really help out municipalities during this time of COVID. So there's the utilization of air ventilation right now for new codes for COVID. And so you're obviously using more energy during this time. To offset that, we're trying to assist municipalities that need a study at no cost. Basically, as long as they have an EMS system, we're utilizing those engineering firms to go to your sites as a municipality to help identify ways that you can cut those costs, since you're already now using more power to ventilate those spaces. These are no-cost scoping studies, a quick punch list of things that you can hopefully do to reduce those costs. We've also rebated air purifiers as long as they meet certain qualifications. So we've seen some people take advantage of that. I myself have one in my house, I have a couple. And as long as they meet certain change air delivery rates and have a HEPA filter, we're providing rebates for some of those air purifiers. So please reach out if you haven't heard about that. One of the other ones, the newest RFPs that we put out is for rooftop units. I don't want to run through all this too long, but basically what we're trying to do is influence the market to replace very old rooftop units. As long as they meet certain amount of tonnage and a minimum tonnage size, they potentially qualify. The way this is different than a normal incentive programs is for a rooftop unit, you just get a rebate based on the ton and the efficiency ratio. This is asking the customer and the contractor, what do you guys need to undertake those projects? What is it financially assistance that you need, and what are the energy savings at that site that we can assist you with? And basically you telling us what you need instead of us giving a strict rebate, and you potentially win an award of that project. And that goes the same for a chiller RFP that we put out as well. We're actually on the second round of this for chiller programs. So we're looking at larger 600 tons and above chiller plants. And it's basically the same process. We're looking to see how we can influence the market to get rid of old, inefficient chillers and understand what it takes financially for customers to do that. And we did the same thing for boilers as well. It's one of the newer ones as well, put out this year. There's some deadlines on each one of these slides, and we'll get the slides to everybody at the end as well. But basically, we're trying to do the same thing for boilers. Understand, boilers are very large, capital-intensive projects, especially for these larger units. And what does it take out there to get these inefficient boilers replaced? And I also want to touch on new construction. I'm not going to go into new construction of all the different ways that we have. What I would say for new construction is there's many paths you can take depending on where you are in the process. We would love to be involved as early as possible, 5 years before you guys are starting to plan these new buildings. We understand though that there's times when you've already started building and you need assistance. Try to get us involved as early as you possibly can. There's incentives for design teams. There's incentives for rebates if you've already completed stuff. So please reach out as early as you possibly can. We need to be the chance to influence these projects. Just by designing a project of code is not going to benefit anybody in the long run. We want to incentivize you to go to more efficient units, which are going to last for 20, 50 years on some of these systems. So you might as well do it now while you're building it, and we're going to incentivize you to do that. And I touched on, if you finish a project, there's a process for rebates as well. Whether it's upstream that we've already discounted directly at distributors where you buy lighting products, hot water heating systems, to putting in for rebates afterwards if a project is completed. So even if you've done work already, there are certain measures that we do allow for rebate style afterwards. So if you completed something already in 2020, please reach out to us to see if it does qualify if you didn't have the opportunity to come to us for an initial letter of agreement before the project was completed. And then,
do you mind if I just jump in for a second? Because I know we're running short on time. I just wanted to plug something that I think is particularly important for this group. So beyond just our energy efficiency programs, the UI and Eversource, we really offer holistic and customized solutions that focus on integrating energy efficiency into your C&I day-to-day operations through strategic energy management and some other approaches to business sustainability. So this is really looking beyond just energy efficiency. It's really important to us that when a customer is addressing the energy efficiency of their building or their facility, that it's really a good time for them to consider other sustainable opportunities. And that includes installing renewable energy technologies or reducing water consumption for an industrial process, just as an example. So while the utilities may not be able to provide all of the sustainable opportunities, our goal is really to connect our customers with the right resources that are available to help them address those opportunities when they're making energy efficient improvements. And one of the things that I really want to highlight for this group, because it's interesting and it's innovative and cutting edge, UI and Eversource are in the process of revamping our strategic energy management program, which is really designed to be a long-term approach to prioritizing and addressing energy efficiency needs. And it focuses on helping our customers set goals, track progress, and report results for those that are participating. So we provide participants with a no-cost consultative service, as well as incentive payments that are available for achieving certain milestones throughout the process. And then there was a mention earlier about capital improvement planning, which I think is so important. And this particular strategic energy management approach is a really good option for customers that have those multi-year capital improvement plans, because we can ensure that energy efficiency elements are incorporated throughout the process, which of course can result in significant cost savings for our participants. So I just wanted to make a quick plug for that because I think it's really important work that's happening, and it ties in all of these elements of energy efficiency and sustainability and renewable energy.
Excellent. Thank you, Liz. And I'm just going to run through these last two slides. I want to make sure Jessica gets enough time to present on her portion. Electric vehicles, they're not currently incentivized in Connecticut. We do have a program up in Eversource, Massachusetts that we're hoping to do a very similar approach down here in Connecticut, where we do cover some of the costs for basically the installation, the infrastructure work to install these, and the customer is basically responsible just for purchasing the EV charging station itself. That is being reviewed currently with the state of Connecticut. So hopefully that comes out in the near future for us to all take advantage of. And the last thing I just really wanted to jump in is a case study that we're working currently with the city of Meriden. And the reason I'm highlighting this particular project is they've taken a comprehensive approach. They've not just done lighting. Yes, they've got lighting and it's a big piece of the project, but they're looking at some of the more capital intensive portions of the work with transformers at the same time, along with throwing in some faucet aerators for some water conservation and some VFD hot water pumps as well. The tremendous amount of energy savings. And I'm just going to highlight the incentive portion here. Basically, by just doing an individual measure, if they were to come to us individually over the years for these measures, they would have gotten $881,000. By putting this all combined together, which is where it's key to make a comprehensive project, they were able to get up to $1,385,000. And on top of that, right now, because of COVID, we've added additional incentive bonuses, which have added an additional 213, which brought it up to 1.6. So they basically doubled the amount of incentive they would have gotten by combining measures together. And really, I want to say thank you very much and for allowing us to speak to you today. If you have any questions on who to go to, please reach out to me or Liz on Grid. We're happy to guide you through the programs and pass you along to the appropriate people. So Jeff, I'm going to pass it back to you. And I think we're going to introduce Jessica.
All right, well, I guess I'll just dig in. Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica LeClaire, and I'm with the Institute for Sustainable Energy at Eastern Connecticut State University. And we oversee Sustainable CT, and I'm going to jump to my slides right now. All right, can you all see these? Hopefully that's a yes. So Sustainable CT is a statewide municipal certification program intended to help towns advance their overall sustainability. And when we say sustainability, we mean more than the traditional environmental sense, though we do include that, but on top we layer on things like transportation, arts and culture, public health, housing, really everything that makes a community a place where people want to live, work, and play. So today I'm going to give just a quick overview of what Sustainable CT is beyond that quick one sentence I just said, walk you through the certification process a little bit, and then talk through some communities who have really demonstrated a high level of achievement with regard to all things energy related. And they've used our program to get a lot of points. So they're showcasing this work, and it all falls within the Sustainable CT framework. And it's really amazing stuff that's happening across Connecticut, including the work in Meriden. Justin, that was very interesting. And it's really great to see communities taking advantage of the opportunities from the utilities. So as I mentioned, Sustainable CT is a statewide municipal certification program. We're still relatively new, so bear with me while I spend a minute just explaining the program. Not a lot of people have heard about what Sustainable CT is. We launched in November of 2017, so we're just about to turn 3. And again, we have actions in our program that are intended to help towns advance their overall sustainability. And we're taking a broad look at what sustainability includes. And one of those components is municipal and residential commercial energy use. We want towns to define their level of success, and we're a certification program. So it could be certification, or it could just be advancing their sustainability incrementally over time. And that's fine too. So we want to try to provide supports and resources to towns as they're marching towards their own visions of success. At the core of the program, we have a menu of actions that cities and towns can pick from to work on to get points that count towards their overall certification. At present, we have about 57 actions, and there's sub-actions. There's like over 200 different ways to slice and dice Sustainable CT. And there's no one size fits all way to navigate the program. So flexibility is a key component because as we saw earlier, we got 169 towns. We're all small, we're all unique though, and we all have different starting places when it comes to sustainability. So we wanted to make sure that the program could meet the needs of all of our cities and towns. So again, towns join the program, they select actions, they work on those actions, they get points, and at the end of the day, eventually when they're ready, they might get certified. Our actions fall within these 9 different categories, and I'm showing you this to reinforce that we're taking that broad look of sustainability. So towns might choose to work on actions that fall within our local economies category, or planning, or transportation, or housing. We're really trying to take a look at all the things that make a community healthy. Now this is a dynamic program, and these are our categories for this year. Since we're turning 3, it's a big birthday. We've heard from towns over the past several years of areas where we need to be pushing and advancing. So January of 2021, this list will look a little bit different. We're adding new categories and new actions to try to continue to provide flexibility and opportunities for communities, but also to continue to advance and become more sustainable as a state overall. So this list is soon to be a relic. We're going to add some more cool stuff, and we're excited to release that at the beginning of 2021. Yet another reason to be excited for 2021. So each action in the program was designed to have as many benefits as possible to really maximize the bang for your buck if you're a community working through the program. And you can see here the 8 different benefit icons that we've selected to ascribe to individual actions. And it's a big program, 57 actions with subcomponents. So it might be that you're not quite sure where to dig in as a town, but you really know that cost savings are important to you right now. So you could zero in on the actions that might lead to those benefits. And actually, a lot of our energy actions do lead to cost savings. As we heard from Justin, you're implementing these energy saving measures, which are actually just saving you a lot of dollars. Towns participate in the program for the benefits they might receive from completing individual actions, but there are other reasons towns have opted to join Sustainable CT. This is a recognition program, so since we've launched, we've offered 2.5 certification cycles. We're just about to wrap up our 3rd, but over that time, 48 towns have achieved one of our 2 levels of certification, bronze or silver. So kudos to those communities for diving into a new program and really rocking it, doing great work, showcasing the work that's happened, building on that foundation, and being able to showcase that sustainability is an issue they care about, they're working on and successful with. And as we heard from Jeff, with regards to companies making these carbon neutral commitments as a way to, well, really their customers are demanding it and expecting it and want to be associated with brands that reflect their values. We've seen too that residents and business owners want to be in towns that represent their values. And working through Sustainable CT and becoming certified is one way that a town can showcase that they are representing the values of current and future potential residents for a town. We have funding and resources that I'll go through very quickly just to help towns move through the program. We intend 99% of our resources to be to help towns with the implementation of the program rather than rewards. So we really want to help towns advance to whatever their particular goals are. And another one I want to just touch on are the partnerships aspects. This is something we've heard from towns who've gone through the program successfully, that they're really reaching out within towns, within commissions, having deeper conversations with regional entities or nonprofits working in a community, and then working outside of the community with other towns, with their neighbors to get things done. And we've heard that's been a beneficial aspect of the program. We're taking a broad look of sustainability. So if this might fall to the economic development or planner to sort of spearhead the project, or whoever in a town, they really need to reach outside their office to figure out what's been done and where the town wants to go. So at present, we have 112 towns that have passed resolutions to join the program. All the towns on this map passed resolutions. Those in blue have passed the resolution, they've registered. You can see them on their map and they're working away on their application. Those that are bronze or silver shaded here have achieved one of those 2 levels of certification. And this is actually a screenshot from our website, and it's kind of a cool feature on the website. And I wanted to tell you about it if you have interest to go and explore later on. On the homepage, bottom left-hand side, you'll see this map. And if you click on any of the towns that are certified, so if we were to click on Portland, we could go and see their certification report. So we know Portland got certified last October. Congratulations, it was a huge lift for the town. They did a great job. They got 330 points. And if we click on their report, we'll see everything that Portland did to get certified. So policies, planning documents, photos from events, which is now creating a learning library. We've got sustainability best practices documented for these 48 communities. There's 1,536 actions that are documented. Pretty awesome. And as more towns are added to the certified list, more best practice information is going to go up on the website. So for towns, it could be a cool way to showcase the work that they've got going on. And for other communities, a place to go and learn, or for the public to go and see what the town's been up to. So it's a great resource. I use it all the time when towns have questions on how to do X, Y, or Z. Just pull out some examples of towns who have really done great jobs in those particular action areas. So we're a certification program. I want to quickly walk you through the certification steps. Very easy. The first step, we pass a resolution at the town council or board of selectmen level. The resolution doesn't commit a town to get certified. It doesn't cost anything to join, and it doesn't, you can pass it whenever you want as a town, basically. So if a town wanted to join next month, that's fine. If they want to join in 5 years, that's fine too. It really just says you're interested, that there's someone from town that we can reach out to as a contact to make sure you have what you need, and that you'll create a sustainability team, which is a group of people in town whose composition is up to the town, but a group of people who will sort of carry out the program. And that can be flexible, and it might change over time, and it likely will. But basically it says you're interested and you're setting up some of the infrastructure to carry out the program. With the resolution at hand, you register, you get a blue dot on the map, and then you work through the program at your own pace. There's no rush for us. We really, truly want to help towns become more sustainable. So we've got the actions. Each action has a detailed description that pulls together resources that could be helpful, technical guides, funding that might be available. We try to help as much as we can to move towns forward as much as they need and want. We work through the program at your own pace and then get certified when it feels right. This is what certification looks like. Our first year in 2018, we certified 22 communities, and we made these awards at the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities annual convention. Year 2, which was 2019, 32 more towns joined the certified ranks. And the math doesn't quite add up if you know we've got 48 total. So some towns went from bronze to silver. So it was really great to see towns advancing that ladder. And this year in 2020, for the first time ever, we've offered 2 certification periods. So towns could have gotten certified in the spring or this fall. We're currently wrapping up the fall certification review. But this spring, Bristol and New Britain worked through the program and achieved certification. So congratulations to both Bristol and New Britain. And they wrapped this up in April. So they were doing this when we were really, well, we still are, but when we were really at the height of the COVID crisis. So amazing work. I'm so excited for the certification reports from the fall of 2020 to come out. A lot of towns have worked through actions in ways that have aided and assisted their COVID response. So there's some cool case studies that are going to be published and put out on that map. So really, there's some amazing work that's been happening across the state. Stay tuned. Probably end of this month or early November, we'll be releasing the final 2020 certified class. So again, we want towns to define success for themselves, and then we want to help them reach that level. They can call us with any questions they've got. We've got different technical supports where we work with partners to help towns move through actions at no cost. So we've got equity coaches. We work with the Nature Conservancy to offer community resilience building workshops. Justin mentioned that they have energy benchmarking. When towns have that request, we also can hook them up with Amy Thompson to get their Energy Star portfolio manager accounts up and running. We have a community match fund that I'll mention in a slide or two. We have webinars, trainings, workshops. We try to cover the bases. Our program is broad, our actions are broad. So it might be that whoever's working on the program is really good in one area, but would benefit from some additional information in another. So we try to provide lots of different topical webinars and trainings to help people move along. And we also have fellows. So each summer for 10 weeks working full time, we have grad and undergraduate students working at the regional councils of governments, but they're there to provide direct support to towns in the region who are registered in Sustainable CT to help them move through complete actions, upload documentation onto their municipal profile, or whatever else a town needs that relates to our program. So I want to touch very quickly on a community match fund. It is a new funding program that we launched in September of 2019. Since that time, we've given out almost $1 million to towns, and it's a one-to-one match. So we're matching the rest, but almost $1 million have gone out to community projects, community-led projects across the state in 50 plus towns. And the program is intended to be fast and flexible. So it's not your traditional grant program where you write a 20-page proposal, you wait 6 months, you get the funding, you write a 50-page report on what you did, where it's occasionally quite taxing to be doing all that work. Here, you call up our community match fund manager, you have a project that relates directly or indirectly to one of our 57 very broad actions. So lots of possibilities. Have that project, have a conversation, write up a couple paragraphs, have a short budget. You put it on our crowdfunding platform. We're working with Patronicity as a program. And then you start to raise funds, and we'll help you with the fundraising. The fundraising component is intended to be small dollar donations. So it's not the town of Ridgefield has a project now, the town's on the hook to raise half of that money. It's neighbors. So if there's a project that's going to benefit a neighborhood, reach out to the neighbors, $5, $10, $15 here and there to get the project up and off the ground. We'll match projects up to $15,000, so the total project cost of $30,000. And there's more money available for projects that are with regard to renewable energy and energy efficiency. So it's a cool program, first come, first serve. All a town needs to be is registered to access this money. And CPTV just put out a special that reviewed 5 or 6 different community match fund projects last month. So if people are interested, I can put that link to the special in the chat feature. But it's a great way to see how these projects has come alive and what sort of benefit they're bringing to towns. So we as a program are supported by lots of amazing funders, and I just want to give a shout out to those funders here. And the Community Match Fund is supported by additional funders as well. So thank you to the generous support of these entities. And now just to wrap up, a couple of quick success stories from communities. We're probably short on time. I can't see my clock. But our program, again, lots of actions. Here are the actions that relate to energy use, renewable energy, energy efficiency, sort of managing that as a town. I won't read them to you, but you can see there's lots of different entry points. And I'm going to highlight just 3 towns who have really rocked it. So Essex, small town in the River Cog area, they were bronze certified in 2019, and they're doing the foundation. They're tracking their energy use with Energy Star Portfolio Manager. And then they reduced their municipal energy use by over 13% in 2018, which was great. So they're understanding how much energy they're using, and then taking energy efficiency measures on. They've done window replacements, boiler replacements, a new roof, taking care of town hall and some schools. So really doing some of that foundational work of reducing their energy use. That's the cheapest energy, is the energy you're not using. And then with what they are using, trying to cover that with as much renewable energy as possible. So they're offsetting over, actually almost, not over, but they're just quite there. I think it's 38%-ish of their municipal energy use with solar power. So really great work from Essex doing the foundations, understanding their energy use, reducing it as much as possible, covering the rest with renewables. And they're not just stopping at the town's energy consumption, they're also trying to help residents and business owners reduce their energy use as well. They've joined the CPACE program, which Justin covered, and they're also running energy campaigns in town, like light bulb swaps, so residents can reap some of those benefits of reducing their energy consumption. Another town, Coventry, they were bronze in 2018 and moved up to silver in 2019. Again, foundational, tracking their energy use. They're also tracking their energy use at their wastewater treatment plant. They've got charging stations for electric vehicles on various town properties for people moving through or coming through Coventry to use. They're also adding EVs to their municipal fleet. So they're tackling that tough nut of transportation emissions and energy use. They have an energy plan. They're working with Eversource to convert their streetlights. So more programs alignment that we're seeing with Eversource. So towns who are really taking advantage of some of these resources are saving a lot of money and also cutting down their greenhouse gas emissions. And they've got an energy conservation and resource policy on the books to continually track energy use and continue to identify ways to save across town departments. So it's practice, it's written down, it's how they want to continue to move forward. So they won't be resting on their laurels in Coventry. They're going to keep advancing the needle. And just like in Essex, they're producing municipal energy from solar, more than 30%. They've got 11 projects in town, generating almost 500,000 kilowatt hours in 2018. So really huge achievements in Coventry. And the last town I want to highlight is Middletown. Went from bronze certification in 2018 to silver. So great job to Middletown. They're doing, it seems like everything. They're tracking their municipal energy use. When they build buildings, they're building buildings that are energy efficient. So they've got a LEED Silver Senior and Community Center, which I've been in that building. It is a very happy feeling building. You go in there, it just feels healthy. And there's art all over the walls, pretty cool. They have a municipal energy plan. They're participating in CPACE. They have CPACE projects on the ground. They've got EV chargings available to the public. So they've got the whole suite. They've purchased their streetlights and they've installed LEDs. So another huge cost savings for the town. And one thing that's unique, they're running Solar for All campaigns, or excuse me, they ran a Solar for All campaign in 2019, working with the Connecticut Green Bank and an organization called Posigen. Solar for All is a campaign that targets low to moderate income homeowners to deploy solar on their rooftops. That's often a segment of the population that's left out of solar deployment, though one that could definitely benefit from the cost savings associated with solar. So Posigen has a specific program for low to moderate income homeowners. Middletown went for it and ran the campaign to the benefit of their residents. And since this is a water event, I wanted to end with at least one water/electricity project. They are offsetting over 30% of their municipal energy use with solar power and a fuel cell. But one thing they've got that's really cool, adjacent to their water treatment facility, the Higbee Water Treatment Facility, they have a 714 panel solar array, which was installed in 2018. This is projected to save the city 280,000 kilowatt hours of electricity per year, saving $9,000 of money per year, which is also helping the city keep water rates stabilized. And it also reduces greenhouse gas emissions. So really a huge win. Just great work that's happening in Middletown, Coventry, Essex, and across. So that's it. I know we're sort of short on time, but I want to thank you for having me on the panel today. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk more about sustainable CT.
Great, Jess. Thank you so much. Liz, thank you, and Justin for participating with this panel, as well as Mr. Jeff Ehrlich, who has been a champion on the Sustainability Committee from its inception. So we're going to take a brief break right now. And again, per requirement, if you can, when you come back, please say hello in the chat so we can document you staying with us. And our last segment will be featuring our governor's executive order, the Lead by Example EO1, and that will be presented by Miss Mary Sotos from DEEP. Okay, so we'll be back in 7 or 8 minutes. Okay, thank you very much. Hi, Mary, can you hear me? Hello.
Hi there. I think I can.
Hey, Mary, how are you? Thank you. Do you want to run your own slides, or would you like us to run them for you?
I can run them, and if there's any issue, I'll defer back to you guys. But should be good to go on my end.
Sounds like a plan. You're the best. Awesome.
Great. Thanks.
We're going to take a few more minutes break here, give them a break, and you can wrap it up and take it home.
Sounds good.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to our Connecticut Section AWWA Sustainability First Virtual Workshop. And again, thank you all for attending. And for those of you that are jumping back in, just say hello in the chat so Romana can document your presence and being back. Last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, we have our Lead by Example initiative, okay? And this is going to provide an overview of Connecticut's first executive order, starting with the water, wastewater, greenhouse gas reduction, which targets the state's executive branch agencies that they must meet by 2030. The presentation will also cover the state as gathered the underlying data to evaluate the progress towards these targets and facilitated agency participation and accountability. And then finally, it will share the latest efforts in building energy and water auditing to help the state prioritize the most impactful and cost-effective projects, okay, to meet these goals. And we are glad to have with us presenting this presentation, Ms. Mary Sotos. And Mary is a senior policy advisor with Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, aka DEEP, and she spearheads the interagency implementation of the Governor Lamont's Executive Order #1 on the sustainability performance of Connecticut state government, and assists with other strategic policy initiatives. And prior to this goal, Mary has served as the Deputy Commissioner for Energy at DEEP. And before joining DEEP, Mary served as the policy lead of the U.S. Energy program at the World Resources Institute, aka WRI, a global environmental research nonprofit. So, Mary, thanks for joining us, and it's all you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for having me here. I'm going to see if I can share my screen and bring up my presentation. Let's see. How are we doing? Can we see it?
Yep.
Okay, wonderful.
There you go.
Great. So a little bit about our Governor Lamont's first executive order. The state has been doing lead by example work around sustainability and specifically around energy efficiency for many years. And, you know, I think you heard a little bit about some of the utility financing programs, and the state has been making use of those for a while. I think we've done up to almost 80 projects using those tools. But I think what really distinguishes some of our sort of legacy lead by example work from where we are right now is this first executive order. This is the first time that state agencies in Connecticut have concrete sustainability targets that are mandatory for every executive branch agency. And it's the first time that that there's been any kind of specific goal related to water and related to waste reduction. And we reference, it references the state's carbon footprint. The state has been doing, you know, work around climate change mitigation for a long time. But again, it's the first time we've really integrated the goals that are applicable to the whole state, specifically to state agency operations. So those goals are listed here, three different impact areas. The first is a GHG reduction target to reduce 45% below 2001 levels. And again, that mirrors the goal that Connecticut has overall as a state. And we also have a water goal to reduce our use 10% from an FY20 baseline. I'll talk a little bit later about how we've been trying to construct that baseline so we know what we're reducing from, but that's, we'll get into data collection in a little bit. And then a 25% reduction for waste disposal. And really, I think what's unique is that all three of these goals, you know, I think will be driving sustainability at an agency level, but also helping us to think strategically across the whole state portfolio. I think what we've been trying to do is make sure that all of the decisions and strategy that we're coming up with is really data driven, because you know, our financial resources as a state are always going to be precious, and we really want to make sure that we're targeting the best investments and the clearest way to meet these goals. What I'm also excited about in helping to coordinate this work is that we really have a robust planning and governance structure set up that we just hadn't had in the past. So the executive order lays out that there are 3 co-chairs who are driving the results here, who are accountable for the results. Those are the co-chairs of the steering committee. So that's DEEP, our Department of Administrative Services, and our Office of Policy and Management. In addition, each agency is required to identify a senior sustainability officer who is responsible for leading the agency's efforts to comply. So it's the first time that agencies have had to designate somebody to be their key point person on sustainability. And that's enhanced our communication tremendously. In our first kickoff meeting, we had participation from every executive branch agency, so all 29, plus all of the agencies that are considered not executive branch, but who are still voluntarily really interested in participating. We had every commissioner in attendance. So the enthusiasm for this work has been really, really amazing to see. We also wanted to harness the issue area expertise and the individual agency interests in different types of projects. So we put together 5 what we call impact teams, so around different topics: renewable energy, energy efficiency. We have sustainable materials management, which covers some of the specifics around the waste disposal goal, but also you can, if you want to think about things upstream, like environmentally preferable purchasing, recycled content, some of those aspects. We have a sustainable water use project team, and I see some of the project team members are on this call, which is wonderful. And then finally, a clean and efficient transportation team. But we know that in order for a sustainability effort like this that's so comprehensive to really be successful, we also need to be thinking in terms of systems that are sort of cross-functional, like across all of these different impact areas. So we've also formed teams around how we're going to be reporting on our progress as transparently as possible, how we're going to be focusing on improving processes. That's a huge theme that those of us in state government hear about a lot. But we think it's really critical here to make sure that we have systems and data collection and project prioritization that's really as streamlined as possible. We have a public engagement group, which has also supported a new website that we have to showcase this effort. It's called Greener Gov CT, is the sort of the new branding, if you will, that we're using for that. So I'll show you a little bit on the website later. And then we also wanted to focus on leased spaces because the state, many state agencies don't own their own buildings. Either they're owned by DAS or by third parties. So we wanted to make sure we had sustainability strategies that could also be applicable for agencies in that situation. So I mentioned before, one of the priorities is to make sure that this work is really data-driven. So for us, that starts with data collection. We have successfully put together most of the information for an FY19, fiscal year 19 baseline for greenhouse gas emissions. So if you unpack greenhouse gas emissions, underlying that is all of the fuel that's used in state vehicles, all of the electricity and natural gas and other delivered fuels for heating across all state buildings. And that's upwards of 3,000 facilities within the state portfolio. So we have a pretty complete baseline at this point for the greenhouse gas side. We are still putting together the water and the waste baseline. On the water side, we're continuing to collect invoices from state agencies. And in fact, we'll be reaching out to a number of the water utilities, some of whom are on this call, to continue to facilitate that work. And as a quick side note on the waste baseline, one interesting feature is that most state agencies do not have quantitative measurement of the amount of waste that's produced in their facilities, in part because the waste collection and disposal setup that we have is often a flat fee. It's not based on the quantity of waste that's being generated. So we've had to find some creative ways to use the information that we do have from some of our larger facilities that have trash compactors or other ways that tonnage can be derived and find some ways to estimate that or extrapolate that into a baseline for the whole state. We also have a terrific data team that we work with. So these are all folks at DEEP who serve as liaisons to different agencies. I think if you think about, for most agencies, collecting data on sustainability and coming up with a strategy, is not necessarily in their wheelhouse. It's not something they've done before. So we have a great team that's serving as, I think a support group really to help agencies do that. So I wanted to focus a little bit on the water data that we have been able to collect, with the caveat that this is still not a complete fiscal year 19 baseline yet. But based on the information that we have, I think by far our largest energy or our largest water user in terms of the agency data we have is in fact our correctional facilities. These are really water intensive facilities. They operate 24/7. So I think that will certainly inform, what facilities we will be prioritizing for water reduction measures. But I think across the other agencies that we see, I think we also are seeing a range of different, water usage intensity, per building, per employee, per occupant, which really tells us that we have a lot of different strategies and reduction measures that we can look into once we get more information from those facilities. And analogous to what you would do on the energy side, where you start with an energy audit to understand where your biggest drivers of usage are, our plan would be to do something similar on the water side, is that we would target some of our biggest water using facilities and conduct a water audit to understand where we might most cost effectively reduce use. So how do all of these different data collection and strategy efforts come together for an agency plan? Well, the executive order requires agencies to put together an annual sustainability performance plan. We have all of the plans from last year collected on the website, so I'll show you where you can find those at the end. But it really is able to report on all of the sustainability information we have for that agency's plans of how they're going to be reducing in each of those categories, showcasing any efforts that an agency has made and commitments that they want to look into in the future. We also have an overall progress report for the EO as a whole that sort of aggregates together all of the agency information. And so you can read a little bit about more of our progress there as well. And I think if you're interested more in the data, our website also has some data visualizations so that you could, here this snapshot is showing the overall executive branch agency. So that aggregated number of how much the state has spent financially on electric, gasoline, natural gas, some of these utilities. But you can also control for total use. We have a number of different metrics. But if you wanted to dig into an individual agency to see, for example, how much Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, how much water did we use last year, or how much energy did how much gasoline did our vehicles use? We have all that information searchable both by commodity and by agency. So really, I think it's giving us so much more visibility and insight into state operations. I think that will just put us in such a different place in terms of how we can move forward on these strategies. And again, it was important to us to make this information available to the public because there may be additional insights into the data or ideas on other strategies that we can pursue that we want to really foster more dialogue. On the water reduction side specifically, the water team that I mentioned has been brainstorming, and as you look through this list, I think many of these measures are probably the same measures, that many of the municipalities and sustainable CT would be pursuing. They're the same measures that anyone in the private sector doing sustainability would pursue. So, I think we're very confident these are the right set of things to be focused on. I think where the strategy becomes more, where the creativity, I think, really is required is thinking about how we roll out these types of strategies most effectively across 3,000 state buildings. What is the best approach? There's some ways that we can think about, prioritizing very, low flow fixtures or water sense fixtures at priority buildings, or there's ways we can do things more top down or bottom up. So I think that's where we're really trying to look to the data and get feedback from all of our agencies on what's going to be most effective to achieve the goals. So that's what we have, and you can see the website here at the end is where all of the information that I referenced before is being compiled. So we would love your feedback on if there's other questions that you think would be useful for this initiative to answer, or other resources that you want to make sure are on our radar. I would welcome your feedback. My contact information is here. It's kind of a unique time, I think, to be working on Lead by Example, given that many state facilities are, minimally occupied right now. Most state employees are attempting to do our work from home. So it's given a new look at what our focus on facilities really should be. And in fact, I think there's still a lot that we can do, and it's a better time than average to do a lot of renovations on facilities, since there aren't too many occupants to contend with. So so that's the presentation, and would love to hear any questions or feedback that you have.
Okay, we have any questions for Mary? Type them in the chat and so forth. That basically is concluding our first virtual workshop, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Romana Longo here, my wingman, and basically just going through some of the logistics on CEUs and the quiz.
So thank you, Dave, and thank you to all of our presenters and to the Sustainability Committee for putting such an amazing, informative program together for all of us. Now, those of you who do not need CEUs, we want to thank you for taking the time to spend the morning with us. You are more than welcome to log off. I would ask for you guys to fill out the evaluation form. The link was sent yesterday. If you need it resend, please email me. Now, for those of us that do need the CEUs, I did send you a link for self-assessment, and I'm just going to go over some of the main points we heard about today that will be on the questionnaire. So one thing that we talked about was the Water Utility Coordinating Committee, and that is shortened for WCCC. So when you see that, WCCC stands for Water Utility Coordinating Committee. Another important facet was if the water resource planning and community land use planning, do they need to be connected? Yes, they do. And another shortened, TDR, do we know what that stands for? That is the Transfer of Development Rights. And the last point is under the Sustainable TV programs. Can municipalities get credit for reducing their energy use? Yes, they can. We've had some great examples of that. So if you could please fill out your self-assessment, send the link. It will come directly to me. I will check those out, and once I have them, I will be able to email you your certificate. So thank you.
Great. All righty. Thank you very much, Romana. Okay. And again, on behalf of the Connecticut Section AWWA, I'm the chairman of the Sustainability Committee, and I'd like to give a shout out to my boss, okay, Ms. Susan Bransfield, our first select woman, who allows me to participate in not only the activities of the Connecticut Section, but the Water Planning Council. And without the support of, all of our employers, these volunteer organizations and committees would have a tough time existing. But again, thank you to all of our participants, all of our presenters that did a yeoman's job. And I think on behalf of all of us here at Connecticut Section AWWA and the town of Portland, okay, we are live here in our Zoom studio at our AKA Senior Center dash Waverly Center. We hope you enjoyed the program, found it in. I believe we're going to be putting these presentations up on the website.
Correct.
And this conference will also be put up on the website, but we'll also be putting up all of the individual presenters' presentations. So on behalf of all of us here at CTAWWA, thank you so much. Have yourself a great week, and stay home, stay safe, and please wash your hands.